Will of fire? Bah! Your will. Mu Yue muttered to himself as he sifted through the flood of memories. He'd never imagined that after graduating from a normal university, instead of becoming a teacher, he'd transmigrate and become one anyway. It seemed the word teacher had a tenacious hold on him. Back in high school, he had been one of the better students in art class. Classmates came to him for help, so often he was nicknamed Teacher Yue. He'd gone to a teacher's college because his family advised it, majoring in education at one of the school's stronger programs. In university, he tutored his roommates and earned the same nickname again. To everyone's surprise, when he graduated, Mu Yue rebelled. He passed the civil service exam and chose not to teach. He never expected that on his first day at the new job, the moment he stepped into his office, he would transmigrate into another body. A young teacher walking into the Ninja Academy office. His new name was Hayate Mugetsu. His given name remained Mu Yue, only the surname had changed. This is not a safe world, he thought. Lunatics and obsessive killers were everywhere, and they were all very strong. The office looked much like those he remembered from his previous life, except for the kunai casually lying on the desk, a reminder this world wasn't peaceful. Worse, he discovered he wasn't just a teacher. His host had been an orphan raised by Root since childhood. He'd been placed at the ninja school by Danzo himself, tasked with observing students and flagging any geniuses. Being under Danzo was not a comfortable position. As Mu Yue tried to think through how to survive in a place like this, an emotionless mechanical voice sounded in his head and a transparent blue panel blinked into view. Teacher system activated. Congratulations, you have successfully become a teacher. Teaching students will earn rewards. The more outstanding the student, the higher the reward. You can take outstanding students as disciples for one-on-one instruction. The teacher will receive rewards as the disciple's strength grows. P.S. Taking a disciple requires mutual consent. One-sided discipleship is not allowed. He scanned the panel. 2 sections appeared, a personal template and a master-disciple area. He opened the personal panel. Name, Hayate Mugetsu. Age, skills, 3-body technique, fire release, great fireball technique, fire release, phoenix sage fire technique, body flicker technique, Konoha-style Taijutsu, evaluation, an elite among chuunin, a slightly more useful cannon fodder in war. Mu Yue suppressed a weary chuckle at the chilly appraisal, closed the panel, and opened the Master-Disciple tab. It was blank, no disciples yet. The bell rang for class. Mu Yue packed his things and headed for the classroom. Since there weren't many teachers at the academy right now, he was also homeroom teacher for a new student class. He scanned the roster and recognized several names. Anko Mitarashi, Kotetsu Hagane, Izumo Kamizuki, future gatekeepers of Konoha. When he saw Uchiha Shisui's name, his eyes lit up. Shisui was no ordinary child genius. If the system rewarded teachers for the growth of their disciples, having Shisui as a student could be invaluable. Mu Yue composed himself and entered the classroom with a warm, sunny smile. The Ninja Academy's rooms were tiered so even the back rows could see the front. His entrance silenced the excited, curious chatter of the 5- and 6-year-olds experiencing school for the first time. One little purple-haired girl with a single ponytail in the first row didn't wait for ceremony. "Big brother, you're handsome. Are you our teacher?" she blurted. Mu Yue smiled and nodded. "That's right, little one. I'm your homeroom teacher from now on." The girl beamed. The other kids relaxed to see his friendly manner. Mu Yue went to the podium, wrote his name on the board, and introduced himself properly. "My name is Hayate Mugetsu. From today on, I'll be your teacher. I look forward to studying with all of you." "Yay! Teacher, my name is Anko Mitarashi." The purple-haired girl was quick to respond, and one by one the others introduced themselves. Shisui answered quietly when it was his turn. Mu Yue noticed the system remained unresponsive. He had hoped that a public introduction might count as acknowledging a teacher, letting him take Shisui as a disciple, but that trick didn't work. He kept his disappointment to himself. When introductions finished, Mu Yue raised his hands to quiet the class. "Before we begin, does anyone know how Konoha was founded?" Silence fell. The children exchanged uncertain looks. Shisui, who had received clan instruction at home, knew something, but he didn't like showing off and wouldn't speak up unless called on. "People built it, of course," Anko guessed after a moment. Yes, people built it, Mu Yue replied, but more specifically, who built Konoha and why? Before our villages existed was the Warring States period, a time of constant warfare. In those days, even children might be forced to take up arms. Battles could break out at any moment. His voice deepened as he painted the harsh reality of that era. The children, perhaps more mature in this world, or simply because they were Konoha's children, listened with unusually solemn faces. Two clans stepped forward during that time, the Senju and the Uchiha, he continued, tone turning passionate. They wanted to protect their future generations and ensure children wouldn't have to fight, so they founded Konoha together and drew other clans into the village. That is how the Warring States ended, and how our village came to be. When leaves dance and the fire burns bright, that light will keep our village alive and let new leaves sprout. It was the selfless struggle of our ancestors, who feared no sacrifice, that brought us here and gave us this ninja academy. That spirit is Konoha's will of fire. Mu Yue's face grew solemn, as if honoring the ancestors himself. He thought Shisui might appreciate a teacher who understood and respected Konoha's history. Shisui certainly seemed more interested now. He'd been told most of what the academy taught he'd already learned at home, and had planned to graduate early to work with the police force. Now he saw school might offer something he hadn't expected. Does everyone know how many chakra natures there are? Mu Yue asked. 5. Water, earth, wind, lightning, fire, a student from a ninja family answered quickly. Not quite. There are 7 chakra natures. Besides the 5 basic nature transformations, water, earth, wind, lightning, and fire, there are 2 special natures, yin and yang. Mu Yue smiled as he corrected them. Asking first, and then correcting left a stronger impression. He went on to explain chakra fundamentals, weaving in jokes and light-hearted remarks to keep the children engaged. Time flew. 4 periods passed in what felt like moments. When the dismissal bell rang, Mu Yue grinned. Class dismissed. Tomorrow we'll talk about chakra extraction. The kids blinked in surprise. Weren't they just starting? But when they thought about it, they'd had 4 lessons. Mu Yue's mix of seriousness and fun had masked the passing of time. Chakra extraction? I can't wait, Anko cried. She had no ninja family background and was hungry for every new thing. School's so interesting. My cousin lied to me, said school was awful. When I go back, I'm telling Auntie he's been stealing money for snacks, Kotetsu complained, indignant. Why not blackmail him and get the snacks? Izumo suggested. Good idea. Kotetsu slapped Izumo on the shoulder. If it works, I'll split them with you. Mu Yue was about to leave when Shisui stood and followed him out of the classroom. The system chimed in. Lesson completed. Settling rewards. Successfully inspired students' sense of responsibility and enthusiasm by recounting stories of ancestors. The lecture content was coherent and highly interactive, resulting in high student satisfaction. Reward settling. 2. On the advantages of an orphan start, reward acquired, perception ninjutsu. First time completing a teaching session, reward acquired, appraisal technique. First time completing an A-rated teaching session, reward acquired, fire release chakra nature transformation mastery. 3 rewards at once made Mu Yue blink in surprise. Memory fragments flooded his mind, most centered on the practice of fire release chakra nature transformation. They felt vivid enough to convince him he'd lived a lifetime as a veteran fire release specialist. Habsheng-sensei, may I ask you something? Shisui asked respectfully. Mu Yue, about to check his status panel again, stopped and led Shisui to the back of the empty teaching building. He sent out perception ninjutsu to sweep the area. There were no strong chakra signatures nearby. Mu Yue relaxed and smiled. Did you not understand something from class? Ask away. Shisui shook his head. It's not about the lesson. I have a different question. Sensei, you know the Senju and Uchiha clans co-founded Konoha, right? So why do people only ever talk about the Senju now? The Uchiha's contributions are barely mentioned, and sometimes people even react to us with dislike. Why is that? Even as a child, Shisui was perceptive and mature. When he went out with elders, he noticed the odd looks strangers gave the clan crest on his back. If both clans had founded the village, why was the Uchiha's role being erased or resented? It puzzled him. Mu Yue glanced at Shisui's earnest face and inwardly sighed. You've probably only read what your clan records allow, haven't you? Shisui nodded. The accessible history was indeed limited. A lot happened after the founding, Mu Yue said, choosing his words carefully. It's complicated to explain quickly. Seeing Mu Yue hesitate, Shisui almost apologized for asking. Mu Yue stopped him with another sentence. Don't worry. If you have time after school, come find me. I'll tell you the full story. He let out a soft sigh. After all, I owe your Uchiha clan a favor. Consider this repayment. Shisui's curiosity spiked. You owe the Uchiha a favor? Muyo gave a practiced, grateful look. My parents were surrounded by enemies during a war and were saved by a ninja named Uchiha Kagami. They later died in another battle, but I never forgot that kindness. The lie rolled easily off his tongue. Being an orphan in his original life had given Muye room to improvise. Sometimes the dead were more convenient assets than the living. Shisui's eyes widened. Uchiha Kagami was his grandfather. He hadn't expected such a connection, and the revelation left him stunned and a little unsettled. He wasn't the kind to demand repayment, though, so he simply thanked Mu Yue. Before Shisui left, Mu Yue used his newly acquired appraisal technique on him. Name, Uchiha Shisui. Chakra, 500. Potential, SS. Evaluation, 6 paths bloodline. Suitable for fire release and genjutsu. Extremely high potential, recommended for apprenticeship. Mu Yue inwardly mused that Shisui was dangerous enough to activate Susanoo with a single eye. Those twin S's on his appraisal were blinding. Even the system recommended taking him as a disciple. He pulled up his own panel out of habit. Name, Hayate Mugetsu. Age, 18. Chakra, 4300. Evaluation, proficient in fire release chakra nature transformation. Your limited chakra is restricting your strength. If you can compensate for this weakness, you are worthy of being called an elite jonin. Mastery. Mu Yue let the word hang in his mind. He had underestimated how much a mastery bonus could mean. At first, he'd thought it would be little more than a jonin-level nature transformation skill, but this suggested his fire release mastery alone could be comparable to the third Hokage's level. Considering he only knew 2 fire release jutsu, the body flicker technique, 3 body technique, and some basic taijutsu, the potential was staggering. With the reward and a boost to chakra, he might edge up to elite jonin, comparable to Kakashi and Asum, in their prime. The thought made him happy for a moment, but the grin faded quickly. He was a root operative. The mark of root on him made him uneasy, and Danzo, ever calculating and willing to send subordinates to die, was a constant threat. Mu Yue set a short-term goal: recruit disciples quickly and improve his strength. Even if he couldn't challenge Danzo and leave, he needed the ability to protect himself. Mu Yue walked into the teacher's office. 3 colleagues, 2 men and 1 woman, sat together, trading complaints about their students. Mu Yue knew them all from his original body's previous visits to the school, and he idly used appraisal technique on each. Name, Ikeya Yu. Chakra, 2000. Potential, C. Evaluation, chuunin fodder. The system's appraisals for the 3 teachers were similar, cannon fodder. Ikeya Yu ran his hands through his hair in exasperation. I'm so unlucky. Why'd Class 2 BAF, Grade 4 end up with me? I was supposed to have Class 1, Grade 3. How am I supposed to handle them? The 2 worst students, Metkai and Uchiha Obito, are in my class. My parents set up a blind date for me tomorrow afternoon, he complained. And that's exactly when I have Class 2, Grade 4. Find someone to cover for you, or take the afternoon off. Blind dates come first, Ueda Aya suggested. She turned when she noticed Mu Yue entering and smiled. Habsheng-sensei, how was your first class? Were the little tips I gave you useful? Mu Yue remembered the upbeat woman's earlier advice. She'd told him to silently repeat, all are radishes and cabbages, to calm his nerves. He chuckled. They were useful. After class, the students all told me not to be a picky eater. Ueda laughed. She assumed he'd had an easy first class. Mu Yue put his lesson plan on the desk. I don't have class tomorrow afternoon. If you need me to cover, I can. He actually wanted a full teaching schedule, especially to see Class 2, Grade 4, with Obito and Metkai. Ikeya's face lit up. Really? Thank you. I'll definitely treat you to a meal as thanks. Inside the Hokage's office, Hiruzen Sarutobi watched Mu Yue through the crystal ball. The 3rd Hokage stroked his goatee as the young root ninja earnestly lectured about the will of fire. Danzo had thought Mu Yue was well hidden, but Hiruzen already knew of some root-trained ninja who weren't on Root's official roster. He put a cautious, pragmatic spin on it. If Danzo's methods strengthened Konoha without going too far, he'd tolerate them. But the Ninja Academy was close to Hiruzen's heart, and he paid it direct attention. He was pleasantly surprised that Mu Yue's first lesson focused on the will of fire, instilling responsibility and love for the village. It was a very good start, Hiruzen thought. Let's see how he develops. If he's a real talent, I'll see about getting him released from Root, he murmured. For now, Mu Yue's performance wasn't enough to demand him outright. Danzo's subordinates were still, in a sense, Danzo's to manage. After dinner, Shisui set out for Mu Yue's house using the directions Mu Yue had given him. Mu Yue lived in the sparsely built southeastern quarter of Konoha, a remote area far from the main district. In that part of the village, buildings were few, so Shisui found the single-story wooden house quickly. It sat in a simple yard, humble and quiet. As Shisui stepped into the yard, the sight before him stopped him cold. He stood there, dumbfounded and deeply shaken by what he saw. Chapter 3. Teacher Mu Yue is a good person. After returning home, Mu Yue went straight to the bathroom and stuck out his tongue at the mirror. Just as he suspected, there was a black curse mark on it, the tongue-severing seal, the signature mark every Root member carried. If he remembered correctly, the seal's effect was that speaking of certain information would instantly paralyze the speaker's entire body. Danzo's seal naturally covered anything about him and Root, so even if a member was captured or defected, they couldn't spill secrets. That alone wouldn't have bothered Mu Yue. He had no intention of betraying Root. What worried him was the possibility that Danzo might be able to control the seal remotely. That would be a fatal vulnerability. Mu Yue thought back to the original story, trying to remember if there was any way to remove the tongue-severing seal. The conclusion was grim. No one had broken it in the original. Some people taken by Root were released from it by the third Hokage's orders, but otherwise the seal only stopped working upon Danzo's death. Danzo, however, wasn't some fragile target who'd drop in a single confrontation. That old schemer guarded his life fiercely. He spent most of his time inside the Root base and went out sparingly. He might even carry a resurrection token. For now, Mu Yue had to accept he wasn't in a position to kill Danzo. The other options were Orochimaru or studying a way to solve it himself, but the Orochimaru lead wasn't something he could pursue at the moment. Mu Yue sighed and put that problem aside for the time being. He glanced at the time and activated his sensory ninjutsu. Sure enough, Shisui was approaching. Danzo had trusted the original owner a lot. Mu Yue had used his sensing several times and hadn't detected any Root watchers on his actions. Expecting Shisui to arrive at any moment, he stepped into the courtyard and on impulse formed hand seals. He poured out his chakra and launched a single, massive fireball, 8 meters high, that incinerated the training dummy and turned a large patch of ground to scorched earth. Shisui, who had just walked into the courtyard, stopped dead at the sight. He was stunned by the sheer scale of Mu Yue's fire release. The Great Fireball technique was only a C-rank fire jutsu by difficulty, and many Uchiha Jonin used it. But even so, no clan Jonin could have converted that much chakra into flame so quickly. Shisui hurried over and once he'd composed himself, apologized. Mu Yue-sensei, I'm sorry to disturb your training. No problem, exhaling a long breath. I was just finishing. He invited Shisui inside and offered 2 cups of water. As they sat, Mu Yue began to explain why the Uchiha were in their current predicament. A lot of it traces back to your former clan leader, Uchiha Madara, he said. You know he defected, right? Shisui nodded. Clan history says the leader left Konoha. If he had merely left, things might have been different. Mu Yue told the condensed version. If Hashirama hadn't been strong enough at the time, Konoha might have been destroyed by Madara. The incident made Tobirama Senju, the second Hokage and already mistrustful of the Uchiha, even more wary. After he became Hokage, Tobirama implemented policies aimed specifically at the Uchiha. Those policies angered the hawkish elements in the clan, who then contemplated seizing power and were discovered by the Anbu and imprisoned. Over time, the Uchiha's negative incidents overshadowed their past contributions, and the villagers began to dislike them. Shisui fell silent, then said, I thought things were simpler than that. They weren't. Mu Yue smiled faintly. There were also Uchiha who worked hard to change things. Uchiha Kagami was one of the most successful. Shisui's interest lit up. What kind of person was Uchiha Kagami to you, sensei? Mu Yue considered the question. He didn't offer hyperbolic praise, but his answer was honest and fitting. He had the will of fire. He tried to be a bridge between the Uchiha and Konoha to ease the conflict. Shisui absorbed that and felt it was the most accurate description he'd heard. I want to be an Uchiha like my grandfather, he said, eyes steady. In the heat of the moment, he'd called Kagami grandfather aloud. Mu Yue blinked at the slip, surprised to hear the word. Shisui noticed and flushed, but he didn't apologize. There was no guilt, only straightforward resolve. Don't worry about repaying my kindness, Shisui said after a moment. If you've time, please pay respects at my grandfather's grave. I think he'd be glad. Mu Yue was moved. He had saved Shisui's parents, and the boy's gratitude showed. Then, almost casually, Mu Yue asked, Shisui, would you be willing to become my disciple? Shisui understood what Mu Yue meant. It might be disadvantageous to Mu Yue, but he didn't want him to feel indebted, and becoming the disciple of such a capable and knowledgeable teacher sounded like a great opportunity. He nodded and said, Mu Yue sensei, do you want to establish a master-disciple relationship with Uchiha Shisui? A system prompt flickered in Mu Yue's mind. He selected yes without hesitation. Relationship established successfully. Current trust level 2. Unlocked, disciple training feedback and disciple gifting return. Mu Yue read the brief descriptions and couldn't help smiling. Disciple training feedback meant that as his disciple trained and grew, he would receive feedback. Some of the disciple's gains would be shared. Trust level 2 meant double feedback. If Shisui gained 1 point of chakra, Mu Yue would gain 2. Disciple gifting return meant that when Mu Yue gave something to Shisui, the system would randomly return a reward once per day. The higher the trust level, the better the reward. Mu Yue reached into his pocket and pulled out a thin booklet, the Fire Release Chakra Nature Transformation Manual he'd written that afternoon. He handed it to Shisui. He'd been saving it to win favor, but now he wanted to test the disciple gifting return. This is a fire release training manual I put together. Take it and read it. I'll check your progress regularly. As a teacher, I'm strict. I won't go easy on you just because of gratitude. Shisui accepted the booklet seriously. Thank you, Mu Yue sensei. I'll train diligently. You gifted your disciple a nature transformation training manual. Due to the disciple's immense gratitude, the reward was a critical hit. You received ninjutsu. Fire Release, Great Dragon Fire Technique, Proficient. The instant the reward arrived, a flood of memories, thousands of hours of practicing the Great Dragon Fire Technique poured into Mu Yue's mind. The Great Dragon Fire Technique was a B-rank fire jutsu. Unlike the Great Fireball, which emphasized range, the Dragon Technique focused on flexibility. The user shaped and controlled a dragon of flame to strike freely. With mastery, hand seals could be reduced to 1, and multiple fire dragons could be released at once. Since the system granted him it at the proficient level, Mu Yue could now unleash 3 fire dragons with a single hand seal. Mu Yue's gaze at Shisui changed. The boy looked less like a student and more like an inexhaustible gold mine, someone who could produce daily rewards. He noticed the sky darkening and said, It's getting late. I'll walk you home so your family doesn't worry. Thank you, sensei, but I can walk slowly by myself. I'm the only one at home right now. Shisui waved him off. He felt he'd already put Mu Yue out enough that day and didn't want to waste his time. Then, perhaps sensing Mu Yue's concern, he added, My uncle comes by often to check on me. Mu Yue nodded and didn't press the issue. Today had been their first meeting. There would be many chances to build rapport. On the walk home, Shisui flipped through the manual. Seeing the fire in the courtyard earlier had made him curious about Mu Yue. As a recognized prodigy and the grandson of Uchiha Kagami, Shisui had met many powerful Uchiha and had high standards. Mu Yue's strength seemed far beyond a typical chuunin. It was strange to him that such a powerful person would be teaching at the academy that mainly covered basics like the 3-body technique. Mu Yue watched Shisui walk away and felt anticipation for tomorrow's classes grow. He had lessons in both the morning and afternoon, and he wondered what rewards the system might hand him next. especially in the afternoon class with Metkai and Obito. What kind of potential would those two have? Chapter 4. The Potential of Metkai and Obito. Brother, how's it going? Not good. That rotten cousin of mine is blackmailing me. He says if I tell anyone his secret, he'll tell Miho next door that I wet the bed when I was 3. Kotetsu Hagane ground his teeth, outraged. How dare his cousin involve little Miho and ruin his glorious image? Despicable. I have a plan, Izumo Kamizuki said after a moment's thought. Play it off like you were just a kid fooling around. Go to his place and mess up his room. Even though you did it, if he doesn't clean it up in time, he'll be the one in trouble. Do it a few times and see how arrogant he acts then. Kotetsu's eyes lit up. With Izumo's strategy, I'll be invincible, like the first Hokage with Tobirama advising him, he declared. If this works, snacks are on me. Mu Yue walked into the classroom just as the two were fussing away. Those two were always like sleeping dragons and phoenix chicks, and he couldn't help smiling. Class begins, he announced, taking his place at the podium. Chakra is the prerequisite for ninjutsu. It's produced by the combination of physical energy and spiritual energy. The students listened carefully. This was essential material. Mu Yue explained the basics, occasionally releasing a hint of chakra for everyone to feel. He laced the lecture with jokes and short stories to keep things lively and peppered in questions to help them remember. Before long, the lesson was almost over. Near the end, Mu Yue gave a quick appraisal as he looked at Anko, who kept smiling and asking questions. Name, Anko Mitarashi. Potential, A. He scanned the rest of the class and called out a few more results. Name, Kotetsu Hagane. Potential, B. Name, Izumo Kamizuki. Potential, B. Mu Yue was surprised by the distribution. Aside from Shisui, whose talent towered above the rest, only a handful of students had potential rated B or higher. Most of the class clustered around C, with a few C+ and C, and even some Ds. Anko's A rating was a little unexpected. She wasn't particularly outstanding in the original accounts Mu Yue remembered, but here she'd clearly shown promise. Still, he had no intention of taking her on as a disciple. He only had 4 disciple slots. One was already taken by Shisui, leaving just 3. Anko might be cute and capable, but his options were limited, and being attractive wouldn't make Danzo suddenly release him from route. Lecture complete. Settling rewards. Mu Yue consulted the reward list. Rating, A. Reward, multiple shadow clone jutsu. He gave a small inward groan. Multiple shadow clone jutsu was an incredibly useful technique, the one Naruto was famous for, but it required a huge reserve of chakra. Mu Yue didn't have that luxury yet, so while the jutsu was valuable, it wasn't something he could put to good use at the moment. After dinner, Mu Yue walked into the teacher's office. A few of his colleagues were busy teasing Ikeya about an upcoming blind date. A tall, thin teacher offered the obvious advice. Tidy up, dress well. Don't look sloppy. You underestimate me, Sugito, Ikeya replied with confidence. I've never been in love, but I know how to behave. Just don't brag too much during the date, Ueda warned, shaking her head as if she'd already seen the outcome. Ueda, just you wait and see, Ikeya promised. Ueda volunteered a skeptical, but her expression softened when Mu Yue entered the room. Habsheng-sensei, you're amazing, she said, grinning. I passed by your class 1 earlier. The atmosphere was great. I can't believe it's your first time teaching. Mu Yue shrugged modestly. Not at all. The students are well behaved, and everyone's helped. Who doesn't like a compliment? Ueda shared some snacks with Mu Yue, and Ikeya immediately felt the sting of being left out. He and Ueda had worked together for 2 years and rarely got a handout. He muttered to himself and then hurried over to greet Mu Yue. If he succeeded on his date, he figured he'd owe Mu Yue a huge favor. When the short lunch break ended, Mu Yue picked up his brush and ink for a little calligraphy practice, one of the few good habits he'd carried over from his previous life. Then it was time for the afternoon slot. Ding. Mu Yue walked into Class 2, Grade 4. Isn't Ikeya-sensei supposed to teach Konoha history this afternoon? A student asked, noticing the substitute. Ikeya has something on this afternoon. I'll be taking the class, Mu Yue answered, settling at the podium. Just then a breathless student burst in, hands on his knees. Huff, huff, sensei, I'm so sorry. I met an old lady on the way and helped her cross the road. That's why I'm late, Obito explained. Sit down and listen, Mu Yue said, nodding. Then he scanned the class and offered his appraisals. Name, Rin Nohara, Chakra 300, Potential B+. Name, Metkai, Chakra 600, Potential S. Evaluation, suited for Taijutsu training, recommended for discipleship. Name, Uchiha Obito, Chakra 650, Potential S. Evaluation, 6 Paths Bloodline, Space-Time Affinity, recommended for discipleship. Class 2 mirrored the first class in overall quality. Most students hovered around C or D. Besides Rin, Metkai, and Obito, only Uchiha Teka reached A-level potential. Mu Yue checked their class progress and began teaching. For students used to teachers who simply read from textbooks, his style was a pleasant surprise. Obito spoke up between exercises. Mu Yue-sensei, you teach way better than the other teachers. If you taught more, I'm sure I'd pass. You were late. I'll be sure to tell Ikeya-sensei that too, Mu Yue replied with a smile. Obito's face instantaneously fell. He was their homeroom teacher's favorite to tease, and the sudden change in his expression added a ripple of amusement to the classroom. During the long break, Mu Yue quietly activated his perception ninjutsu to make sure nothing unusual was happening across the grounds. Finding everything in order, he called Metkai and Obito out for a moment. Exam tips. Habsheng-sensei, please don't tell Ikagaya-sensei, Obito pleaded again, not ready to give up. That depends on your performance, Mu Yue said with a smile, refusing to give a straight answer. Sensei, is something wrong? Metkai scratched his head. He didn't understand why he'd been singled out. He hadn't done anything wrong. Mu Yue looked at him. This man who was said to have nearly kicked the end of the world into existence, whom Madara called the strongest taijutsu user, yet still green in many ways. He wore the famous green jumpsuit, but his belief and understanding, not to mention his strength, still had room to grow. Metkai believed his daily training would make him a taijutsu master someday, but he hadn't fully grasped what his father meant about youth and self-discipline. Mu Yue was happy to help him along. Your theoretical grades are giving Ikagaya-sensei a lot of trouble, Mu Yue said. Even usually carefree Obito lowered his head at that. It's not that I don't want to learn, those problems are just impossible to understand. Why do they put those animals together and ask how many there are? He protested. Mu Yue remembered his own high school math struggles and felt lucky his major hadn't required advanced math. Still, he knew this wasn't a hard subject. The math at the Ninja Academy was basic, and there were fewer classes than history. But it's not only math, he added. You're weak in history, ninjutsu theory, and the other subjects too. What's the use of knowing all that history? It's all in the past, Obito grumbled. I think history class should be cancelled. Metkai readily agreed. Yeah, I can't memorize all that history. You can tell Lord Third about that. He's the principal, Mu Yue said. My opinion doesn't count there, but you can't keep going like this. It's not good for Ikagaya-sensei or for you. Does Habsheng-sensei have some secret to passing exams? Obito asked, suddenly hopeful. Metkai looked at Mu Yue eagerly too. Who wouldn't want a shortcut out of last place? It is a secret, Mu Yue said, and it's very simple. Do practice problems. Study. Practice problems. They both looked puzzled. Think of it as special training for the exams, Mu Yue explained. If you pass, there'll be a reward. A reward? Like a serving of dango, Obito brightened. I can teach you a ninjutsu or a taijutsu. Guide your training, Mu Yue replied. Really? Their eyes widened. Such a windfall seemed too good to be true. There's a condition, Mu Yue reminded them. You have to pass the exam in 1 month. Is this what youth is? I'm fired up, Metkai declared, excited. I'll definitely pass this time, Obito promised. Mu Yue watched them getting fired up and nodded inwardly. Advanced predators often presented themselves as eager prey. They thought they'd hit the jackpot. A secret for passing and direct instruction. For Mu Yue, the plan was simple. Guide them during special training and naturally become their teacher. Even if they failed, he could reward their effort and win favor. He'd learned not to force discipleship on everyone like he had with Shisui. Shisui's background made that awkward, and Mu Yue's current role, teaching only one class, meant long-term guidance would be hard. If he were their homeroom teacher, managing them would be easier. After arranging the special training, Mu Yue led them back to the classroom. Obito, why did Habsheng-sensei call you out? He didn't punish you, did he? Rin Nohara asked, worried. How could it be a punishment? Hapsheng-sensei taught me the secret to passing exams. Obito defended him at once. If Mu Yue could help him stop being dead last, Obito would become Mu Yue's biggest fan. Rin, you better listen carefully too, or I'll beat you on the next exam, Obito joked. It'd be great if you actually could surpass me, Rin said with a helpless smile. She wasn't first, but she was near the top. When the bell rang, Obito showed an unprecedented seriousness. He was determined to pass, and was already thinking about Shininjutsu to learn. Rin watched him and wondered, is he really serious this time? 3 minutes later, Obito was slumped over his desk, asleep. A piece of chalk traced a perfect arc through the air and smacked him on the head. He looked around, bleary, saw Mu Yue's face, Rin's face, Metkai diligently writing, and remembered his earlier boast. Heat rushed to his cheeks and his drowsiness vanished. After that small interlude, the rest of class went smoothly. Teaching completed. Evaluation, a reward leaf whirlwind. This time the reward wasn't a ninjutsu, but a taijutsu, even one Metkai would develop later. It looked like a simple kick, but Mu Yue, having learned its basics, found it trickier than it appeared. The stance, the muscle burst, the chakra release, all required finesse. Mu Yue worried he might run out of things to teach Metkai, so he was pleased to have this technique to offer. After school, Mu Yue wandered into the southern Konoha forest, looking for a secluded training spot. He still maintained a root identity, and Danzo certainly knew where his official home was. Given Danzo's hatred of the Uchiha, if he discovered Mu Yue had been teaching Shisui ninjutsu without reporting it, suspicion would follow. Mu Yue couldn't keep sensory techniques active all the time. His chakra wouldn't allow it, so he planned to train Shisui outside the village from now on. He eventually found a quiet clearing beside a small river that would do nicely. He made a note of the location and headed home. His caution proved justified. When he entered his yard, a ninja wearing an animal mask was standing inside. Chapter 6, Sick Danzo. Knight, this is Lord Danzo's latest instruction. A Root ninja slid a scroll into Mu Yue's hand. Knight was Mu Yue's code name in Root. He only nodded and took the scroll. Root operatives didn't linger in conversation. The man melted away as soon as he handed it over. Before he departed, Mu Yue gave him a quick appraisal. Name, Hirataro potential, B chakra, 7,000. Evaluation, A, Jonin level, quite capable. Seeing the 7,000 chakra rating, Mu Yue couldn't help but feel a little envious. He himself didn't even have 5,000 yet. Once the Root ninja vanished beyond the reach of his sensing jutsu, Mu Yue went back to his room and opened the scroll to read Danzo's orders. Uchiha Shisui in your class is considered a genius of the Uchiha clan. Observe him, confirm his character, and evaluate him. Mu Yue sighed. Danzo's paranoia about the Uchiha bordered on obsession. Shisui was only 6 years old and had just started the ninja academy. Simply because the boy had a reputation as a clan prodigy, Danzo wanted him watched and assessed. It was possible Danzo hoped to recruit Shisui into Root, but Mu Yue didn't think that would succeed. The third Hokage kept Danzo in check. The third could tolerate Root, but not one that grew too powerful. A genius Uchiha's potential was a dangerous thing. Such boys either stayed safely inside the Uchiha clan or ended up in Anbu. Mu Yue burned the scroll with a fire release technique. There was no point leaving a record. The instruction itself was within what he could accept. Even without Danzo's message, Mu Yue would have reported Shisui as a genius in his normal evaluations. With Danzo's interest, hiding it would only invite trouble. He created a shadow clone to practice jutsu while his main body worked on increasing his chakra reserves. Lack of chakra was his biggest limitation. No matter how many jutsu a ninja learned, without sufficient chakra, they could never reach their full potential. In Mu Yue's view, chakra largely determined a ninja's ceiling. The next morning, with no classes scheduled, Mu Yue went to the Ninja Academy archives to sort through recent 4th grade exam papers. While he was at it, he also picked up 1st grade papers. He intended to take on disciples, and boosting their theory scores wasn't an empty promise. The exams were predictable. The same question types reappeared year after year, sometimes only rephrased or with different values. A few papers even had identical questions. Mu Yue was confident his future students could pass with just a couple years' past papers worth of practice. Satisfied, he took a few sample exams with him and headed to the office. Yesterday she kept listening to me talk. She's definitely interested. Ikegaya Yu was mid-complaint when Mu Yue walked in. Or she just didn't want to be rude and stop talking to you, Ueda Aya shot back. When we paid, she even offered to split the bill. She's already thinking about me. Ikegaya insisted. Maybe she was just afraid you'd use "I'll treat you next time" as an excuse to ask her out again. Ueda rolled her eyes. Kimura Sugito was watching the exchange from nearby. He went on a blind date yesterday, he explained to Mu Yue. Yu was describing it and wanted us to brainstorm how to win her over, but Ueda thinks the girl wasn't interested and urged him to move on. Hapsheng-sensei, you're just in time. Any special techniques for pursuing girls? Ikegaya asked as soon as Mu Yue arrived. He probably assumed Mu Yue had plenty of dating experience. Sincerity, Mu Yue replied after a moment. Let them feel that you're sincere. Ikegaya looked troubled. How do I make her feel that? Give it up, Ikegaya. You don't even resemble Habsheng-sensei. Techniques that work for him probably won't work for you, Ueda said dryly. How can that be? Okay, sure, Habsheng-sensei is a bit better looking than me, but it's not that big a difference. Ikegaya protested. You really won't stop until you hit a brick wall, Ueda muttered. As a woman, she had little patience for wishful thinking. Mu Yue smiled and offered a brief bit of encouragement. He didn't want to get dragged into a long argument, and besides, he secretly hoped Ikegaya would stay busy. That would open him a chance to substitute teach Class 2, Grade 4 again. That afternoon, Mu Yue deliberately toned down his lecture. From earlier system feedback, he had deduced that lecture evaluations were based on two things: the quality of the lecture content and student satisfaction. He wanted to aim for a B-rank evaluation, not too high. There was an extra reward for the first time you reached a new rank, and if the first A rank gave a bonus, he reasoned the first B rank should as well. After class, the evaluation came in B. Reward obtained, chakra plus 20. First time completing a B rank teaching evaluation. Reward obtained, proficient in chakra form transformation. A flood of memories poured into Mu Yue's mind, detailed training sequences for form transformation. He was pleasantly surprised. In the chakra system, form transformation stood alongside nature transformation as a fundamental method to enhance ninjutsu. Although he was only marked as proficient, not yet a master, form transformation didn't depend on nature chakra types. The most famous example was Naruto's Rasengan, a high-power, hand-seal-less technique built purely on form transformation. I can start developing Rasengan, Mu Yue decided. With the original work's training outline and his new proficiency, creating the Rasengan himself shouldn't be too difficult. The extra 20 chakra from the B rank also made Mu Yue consider deliberately aiming for a few more B rank evaluations in future classes. The gains were small each time, but they would add up. Mu Yue's days were full now. Teaching by day, guiding Shisui in the evenings, developing jutsu at night, and giving special weekend training to Metkai and Obito. Life felt exceptionally satisfying, and he hoped it could continue undisturbed for a few years. Unfortunately, he hadn't transmigrated into a peaceful timeline. Turmoil was likely waiting. On the fourth day after Mu Yue arrived in the ninja world, bad news came back to Konoha from the front lines. 7. Clouds of War. Frontline skirmishes had escalated. Kumogakure had sent Shinobi into the land of hot water on the border of the land of fire, and rumors spread that the Eight-Tails Jinchuriki might have appeared. When Mu Yue heard the reports, he realized the Third Shinobi World War was no longer far off, if it hadn't already begun in scattered clashes. As a root ninja, he knew more than most. Since White Fang's death last year, undercurrents had rippled through the ninja world. Kumogakure, Iwagakure, and Tsunagakure were all stirring. When Mu Yue had only watched anime, he'd thought White Fang was just another famous powerhouse. After inheriting the original host's memories, he finally understood the true meaning of that title. Others won renown by duels or heroic deeds. White Fang's reputation rested on a different, darker skill, killing efficiently. Wielding a chakra-shortened sword, he became a ruthless mowing machine on the battlefield. Whether Jainin or Jonin, a flash of white could mean instant death. He wasn't necessarily the strongest overall, but his style was perfectly suited to overwhelming the weaker. Anyone beneath his level could be cut down in an instant. Losing such a warrior left Konoha vulnerable to covetous eyes, especially from Kumo and Iwa, who had suffered few losses in the Second Shinobi World War and now believed they could challenge for supremacy. Those damned Cloud Ninjas, why can't they leave us alone? It feels like we're headed to war again, Ueda Aya sighed. If White Fang-sama were still alive, they wouldn't dare be so arrogant, Ikeya said indignantly. It's okay. We still have the third Hokage and Orochimaru-sama. They'll lead us like before. Kimura Sugito tried to brighten the mood. Mu Yue asked the question that worried him most. If a war breaks out, will our teachers be sent to the front? It depends on how intense it gets, Ueda Aya replied. If it becomes severe, teachers might be assigned to units according to their specialties. Hearing that, Mu Yue's heart tightened. He prayed inwardly, to whatever gods, ancestors, or Tao he could think of, that he'd either be chosen later or not at all. He didn't want to leave the academy yet. He could still grow training alone, but it wasn't the same as having a shortcut. The Third Shinobi World War was especially dangerous. The 5 great shinobi villages were fighting to the death, and Uchiha Madara and Black Zetsu were scheming in the shadows. Habsheng-sensei, don't worry. We're the top village. It won't get so bad that our teachers have to go to the front, Kimura said confidently. I wasn't worried about being sent. I just asked so I can prepare if it happens, Mu Yue said with a smile. He hadn't meant to admit how much he dreaded being sent before he'd become stronger. He practiced calligraphy until the bell, then walked to Class 1, Grade 1. From the doorway he looked in. The shadow of war hadn't reached the children's joy. Laughter and chatter filled the room. Brother, how'd my brilliant plan work? Did you completely subdue your cousin? Izumo Kamizuki asked after 2 days, curious about Kotetsu Hagane's results. Sigh, don't ask. Your plan was great, but my cousin's too cunning, Kotetsu said, dejected. At first it worked. His cousin had been scolded by their aunt. But before Kotetsu could follow up, his cousin retaliated with an identical trick. They were children, only a year apart, and soon they'd been going back and forth, scolded and hit until they finally called a truce and labeled the whole thing a forbidden ninjutsu. There really is someone like that, Izumo said, impressed. I don't have any more ideas for now. It's fine, Izumo. You gave me several good ideas already. Tell me what's bothering you, and I'll help, Kotetsu offered. I like a girl who lives next door, but I don't know how to get closer to her, Izumo admitted. Simple. Give her something she likes, Kotetsu suggested. Izumo thought a moment. She watches my family's flower garden when she walks by. She must like flowers, and her family doesn't seem to have any. Then give her flowers. She'll love it, Kotetsu said. Ahem, class is starting. Mu Yue cleared his throat twice, and the noisy room fell silent. Even after only 4 days, the students liked their relaxed, entertaining teacher and listened without needing to be ordered. Lecture, evaluation. Reward, water release, water formation wall. The name flashed in Mu Yue's mind, and information followed. Water formation wall. B-rank water release ninjutsu that forms a wall of water in front of the user. Tobirama's version was different. It drew a circle, providing 360-degree, blind spot-free protection. Checking the sudden knowledge that had appeared, Mu Yue discovered he had just mastered water release chakra nature transformation, something he hadn't known before. He realized without being given that nature transformation, he wouldn't have been able to use any water release at all. Mu Yue silently gave the thoughtful system a thumbs up. After school, Mu Yue took Shisui to the training spot he'd found beside a small river in the southern forest. You've practiced fire release, great fireball technique well. Today I'll teach you a new fire release jutsu, Mu Yue said, outlining the session. He clapped once, formed a single hand seal, and exhaled 3 enormous fire dragons in one breath. The dragons circled in the sky and dove into the river, vaporizing a huge amount of water. Steam churned over the surface. Fire release, great dragon fire technique, Shisui recognized immediately. He'd seen an Uchiha Jonin use it. Because he knew what it was, he was even more surprised. Mu Yue had produced 3 fire dragons with 1 breath and only 1 hand seal. Shisui's curiosity about Mu Yue's strength deepened. Watch carefully. I'll demonstrate it again, Mu Yue said, seeing the expression on Shisui's face and knowing he'd made his point. Chapter 8. Gold coins exploded. The difficulty of this ninjutsu is instantly compressing a large amount of chakra into the shape of a fire dragon. Mu Yue explained the release method to Shisui as he demonstrated. He had recently become proficient at chakra nature transformation, so he also walked Shisui through several related operations. I see. I think I understand a little, Shisui said, nodding as he prepared to try it himself. His hands flashed through the hand seals, inner chakra erupted, and then he compressed and molded it into shape. Fire release, great dragon fire technique. Shisui exhaled a 1-meter-tall fire dragon. It shot up, spun once in the air, and then dissolved into the water. Mu Yue applauded and smiled. I thought you might need a few tries, but I underestimated your talent, he said, genuinely surprised. Shisui had learned a B-rank ninjutsu without even using his Sharingan. Was this the true worth of double S-rank talent? It's because teacher Mu Yue teaches so well, Shisui replied humbly. He didn't deny that he picked things up faster than most, but he also sincerely appreciated how thoroughly Mu Yue taught. Except for the first demonstration, when Mu Yue had shown off by using only one hand sign, every other demonstration was done with full hand seals. The technique slowed down and explained step by step. Shisui didn't feel he had mastered the dragon fire technique yet. He could only use it, not control its size or the number of dragons perfectly. Mu Yue, pleased with Shisui's humility and diligence, grinned. Seeing the disciples' chakra panel grow day by day confirmed Mu Yue hadn't been idle either. Time slipped by quickly when both of them were focused on practice. When Shisui released the technique again, he noticed the glow of the flames was unusually bright and realized it was almost dark. A peculiar thought crossed his mind. Was teacher Mu Yue's gentle voice some kind of ninjutsu that made people forget the passage of time? Teacher, I'm heading back, Shisui said, preparing to leave. I've recently summarized my experiences with chakra nature transformation. You should read it when you go home. Mu Yue produced a small booklet and handed it to Shisui. Shisui paused, accepted the booklet, and bowed his thanks. He didn't say much, but his respect for Mu Yue deepened. Mu Yue was an excellent teacher. In only 4 days, as mentor and student, Mu Yue had never held anything back. The important things were always taught first. Watching Shisui walk away, Mu Yue smiled to himself. As expected of his best gold mine, it had produced something again. You gifted your disciple a nature transformation cultivation manual. Due to the disciple's immense gratitude, the reward was critically boosted, granting ninjutsu wind release, pressure damage, proficient. Suddenly, a large amount of knowledge about the technique and usage of wind release pressure damage flowed into Mu Yue's mind, along with some wind release chakra nature transformation knowledge. He was very satisfied. Wind release pressure damage was top tier among wind techniques, large range, strong destructive power, and compatible with his fire release jutsu. The wind nature transformation knowledge would also help in developing a nature-enhanced Rasengan. He had originally planned to develop fire release nature for his Rasengan, but now that he had wind, he would prioritize pushing it toward a Rasen Shuriken. After a few days, Mu Yue had roughly figured out how the disciple feedback system worked. Rewards seemed to depend on 2 factors, the quality of the item he gave and the disciple's gratitude, with the latter carrying more weight. On the second day, he'd given Shisui a string of snacks and got 10 shuriken as a reward. On the third day, he'd given homemade food and received 50 chakra points. Both gifts were food, but the third yielded a much better reward, clearly because the gift had more heart and Shisui liked it more. Understanding this, Mu Yue began planning how to get an even bigger reward. He intended to check Shisui's profile at the ninja school tomorrow to find his birthday. It was the 5th day since Mu Yue had transmigrated into the Naruto world. He had only 1 class that day, but a 3rd-grade teacher in the office had an emergency and needed a substitute. Mu Yue wouldn't miss such an opportunity. 2 classes handed in 2 different rewards, 20 chakra for one and fire release, great fireball technique for the other. It was the first time the system gave him a ninjutsu he already knew. Pleasantly, duplicate ninjutsu increased his cultivation experience for that technique, like gaining a +1 enhancement. Teacher Habsheng, you're too easygoing. If you keep this up, other teachers will keep asking you to cover classes, Ueda Aya said with concern. Mu Yue just thought, there's such a good thing? Then I'm all for it. We're colleagues, it's fine. Besides, I enjoy teaching students, he answered with a smile. Ueda Aya was momentarily speechless. From his expression, she felt he truly meant it. Was such a good person real? Covering classes didn't pay extra. If anything, it was working for free. Weekend arrived quickly. The ninja school's schedule matched his old life. Classes Monday through Friday, weekends off. Per their arrangement, at 8 in the morning, Mu Yue brought Obito and Metkai to the spot where he and Shisui had been training, ready to begin their special training. Why do we have to wake up so early on a day off? Obito complained, flopping onto a desk Mu Yue had prepared. Early? I don't see a problem, Metkai said, scratching his head, unable to sympathize with Obito. Mu Yue handed them the test papers he had prepared. He'd designed them to match their short 5-day class progress. No use giving them last year's monthly exam. For their situation, he didn't plan to throw in hard problems. Getting the easy points and passing was enough. Teacher Mu Yue, this is... Obito trailed off as he stared at the questions. Not long after, Shisui arrived to practice. He saw Obito and Metkai struggling over the test papers and looked puzzled. They're 4th grade students. I'm tutoring them. You go ahead and practice. It won't get in the way, Mu Yue explained. He had called Shisui the night before. He thought it would be interesting to watch the older students tackle boring test papers while their younger classmates practiced ninjutsu. Obito was doing his exercises when a snippet of conversation reached him. He looked up and froze. Shisui. The Uchiha lived together on clan land assigned by Konoha, so members of the same generation at least knew of one another. Even if you hadn't met someone, you'd heard about them. Geniuses like Shisui were always the kind of name the elders talked about. Obito felt a little puzzled to see him here, and even more surprised at how familiar Shisui seemed with Mu Yue. Is teacher Mu Yue related to Shisui somehow? The thought floated in his head, flimsy and unsure. Teacher, I'm done. Metkai suddenly shouted beside him, full of energy. Obito blinked. That was fast. He hadn't even stopped for very long. He leaned over and saw that Guy had only attempted the first 3 multiple-choice questions. The rest of his paper was blank. The whole test had only 10 questions, 4 multiple-choice and 6 open-ended. Even though Obito didn't know all the answers either, he would at least have filled something in. Mu Yue walked over, looked at Guy's paper, and smiled. Guy had 2 wrong out of the 3 he'd tried. Only the first was correct. I'm sorry, teacher. Guy stammered, embarrassed. It's okay. Not knowing is normal. If you already knew, I wouldn't be teaching you, Mu Yue said warmly. Don't feel bad about a low score. Look on the bright side. You have a lot of room to improve. Improving from 5 to 25 points is much easier than going from 80 to 100. Metkai trembled as if electrified. He had been written off as a failure for as long as he could remember. This was the first encouragement he'd received from anyone besides his father. Teacher, you're right. I do have a lot of room for improvement. His spirits soared, and he listened intently as Mu Yue explained the problems, trying as hard as he could to understand. Then it was Obito's turn. He'd filled in 6 answers and only gotten 2 right. Mu Yue treated him the same, a little comfort, then a clear, patient explanation of the mistakes. When he finished, he handed the 2 boys 2 more similar test papers. More to do, he said. Obito couldn't help watching Shisui. The boy was practicing fire release. Fire release, great fireball technique. Shisui formed the signs in a blur and spat a 2-meter-high fireball that streaked toward the river. Obito felt admiration well up, so this was the famed clan genius. Obito himself, as an Uchiha, knew the great fireball technique, but his was a much smaller, weaker version compared to Shisui's. He wondered, is he another genius like Kakashi? Metkai, who didn't know Shisui by name, was just as astonished by the sight. Shisui looked only 6 or 7 years old at most, yet he could use such powerful ninjutsu. It reminded Guy of Kakashi, who had shown his genius by graduating early from the academy. The thought put a mixture of awe and competition in Guy's mind. Then Shisui moved on to something else. Fire release, great dragon fire technique, he announced. A dragon of flame coiled into the sky. Guy's surprise grew. This boy knew more than one advanced fire technique. Guy had practiced the school's 3-body technique for 3 years and still felt he'd barely mastered it. Seeing the fire dragon fly controlled, Obito's envy flared. If he could do that, he'd certainly impress Rin. Mu Yue watched and praised calmly. Your form has improved a lot since yesterday. The dragon's speed is higher. You must have practiced plenty after you returned. Shisui smiled. It's mostly thanks to your cultivation manual, teacher Mu Yue. Then let me show you again, Mu Yue said, stepping forward. He gathered chakra, compressed it, and spat out 3 giant fire dragons at once. The 3 beasts were fierce and blistering, far more intense than Shisui's single dragon. Obito's admiration shifted. What Shisui had done was impressive, but Mu Yue's dragons were on another level. The 2 techniques didn't seem like the same jutsu at all. Shisui's dragon was lithe and elegant. Mu Yue's were overwhelming and fast, almost as if no hand seals were needed. The 3 dragons raced through the sky, leaving fiery trails that traced out large characters in the air. Stop staring and finish your questions, they read. Obito blinked and found Mu Yue looking down at him with a gentle smile. He started in surprise, then lied casually, I was just tired from exercising and looking up for a moment. He glanced at Metkai. Guy had already snapped back into focus and picked up his pen. Seen enough? Mu Yue asked. Seen enough, seen enough. Obito hurriedly set his pen to paper. After a while of working, Obito couldn't help asking, Teacher Mu Yue, what's your relationship with Shisui? Teacher and student. What did you think it was? Mu Yue answered, glancing briefly at Guy's paper. Hey, Obito thought to himself, I'd guessed master and disciple too. He didn't mention the odd fleeting idea that had crossed his mind earlier. Then he blurted out, If I pass, can you teach me that ninjutsu you just used? Of course, Mu Yue replied. Really? Obito's face lit up. Really? Metkai spoke up next, eyes bright. Teacher Mu Yue, what taijutsu have you mastered? Even though Guy admired the fire technique, his heart belonged to taijutsu. He wanted Mu Yue's physical skills. Mu Yue didn't answer with words. He walked over to a large tree, gathered chakra into his feet, tensed, and launched an extremely fast whirlwind kick. With a solid crack, the tree toppled, sending up a puff of dust. Mu Yue retracted his foot, brushed off his leg, and smiled down at Metkai. Do you like this taijutsu? He asked. Watching Mu Yue's leaf whirlwind, so fast, so clean, Metgai's eyes lit up. It was everything he'd ever imagined about taijutsu. Simple, quick, powerful, and absolutely cool. I love it. You have to teach me this when the time comes, he burst out, all enthusiasm. As long as you want it, Mu Yue replied with a smile. Metgai's reaction wasn't surprising. After all, this style of taijutsu would later inspire his own series of techniques, Great Whirlwind, Strong Whirlwind, various leaf whirlwinds. So of course he liked it. With Mu Yue's assurance, both he and Obito brightened. Even the test papers that usually made them groan suddenly seemed less daunting. Watch me go all out. This time I'll get more than 4 right. Obito rubbed his hands together as if gearing up for a fight. I must get more than 3 right, or I'll run 500 laps around Konoha tonight. Metkai declared, instantly imposing a strict penalty on himself. He was serious about learning the leaf whirlwind. He wanted to spar with Kakashi and see how much he'd improved. The burst of determination didn't last long. After a few more questions, Obito realized a hard truth. When it came to tests, no amount of desperation seemed to help. He might be able to summon a larger flame release, great fireball technique, or land 5 shuriken in one throw under pressure, but theory questions were a different beast. He propped his head on one hand and twirled his pen with the other, annoyed enough that even the leaves stirred by the wind looked like they were mocking him. He glanced at Metkai. They'd been classmates for over 3 years and shared Kakashi as a friend, but they'd never actually hung out. Their relationship was ordinary, no enemies, no close friends, just classmates and friends of a friend. Obito had always assumed Metkai was the epitome of dead last. Obito himself was labeled the same sometimes, but he thought he was simply weak in certain subjects. His ninjutsu and shuriken skills weren't bad. His theory was the problem. Other Uchiha were just that much better, making him look worse by comparison. Metkai, though, was different. He was genuinely at the bottom in almost everything, both theory and ninjutsu, but right now he was more patient than Obito. Despite his frustration, Metkai kept at the problems. Obito remembered the bold speech Metkai had once given when mocked. If I keep working hard like this, I'll become the strongest taijutsu ninja one day. At the time, Obito had been skeptical, but watching Metkai now, he found himself rethinking things. Metkai might not become the absolute strongest, who knew, but he certainly deserved more respect than the taunts suggested. Maybe becoming friends wouldn't be a bad idea. They could team up against Kakashi, which sounded appealing. Inspired, Obito started writing frantically. Mu Yue watched them, thoughtful. He hadn't expected this pair to create such a positive dynamic. Even usually restless Obito had calmed down and was doing the work. That was useful. Mu Yue could use similar methods to motivate him in the future. When they finished, Mu Yue graded the papers. Obito had 3 correct answers. Metkai had 2. Ugh, still not 4. I did my best, Obito slumped over his desk. 500 laps tonight then, Metkai added, accepting his penalty with grim determination. Mu Yue tried to cheer them. You're only 5 correct answers away from passing, and you improved by 1 question in just an hour. That's progress. Obito and Metkai thought about it. It did seem more hopeful. Passing, and better ninjutsu, was within reach. Mu Yue then produced 2 more test papers with a smile. Obito stared at the fresh sheets, thought of the 3 weekends left before the exam, and felt his vision darken. Still, he picked up his pen. If he quit now, wouldn't all the previous efforts be wasted? Meanwhile, Shisui, his chakra recovered, was practicing fire release again, summoning dragon-shaped flames that drew Obito's eyes. An idea formed. Mu Yue-sensei, Obito asked after a moment, after we learn your ninjutsu, will we be considered your disciples, like Shisui? If you want that, then yes, Mu Yue answered, evasive, but not unwilling. Heh, if we'll be disciples someday anyway, why not teach us now? Obito said, revealing his motive. He'd already pulled out a small dagger, an excited kid ready to bargain. Mu Yue eyed him suspiciously. This was all part of his plan, but Obito's eagerness was almost too blunt. I'm not trying to avoid studying, Obito insisted, patting his chest. I think we can do both at once. He tugged Metkai closer. Guy, you agree, right? Sensei, Obito's right, Metkai said. He wanted to learn the leaf whirlwind so badly he could taste it, so he could finally spar Kakashi properly. Mu Yue hesitated. What if you 2 don't pass? Whatever you say, Sensei, we'll listen, Obito replied confidently. Me too. Metkai nodded. Mu Yue still looked torn, as if weighing something important. Obito seized the moment. Mu Yue-sensei, trust me. I'll study hard with you and won't let you down. Me too, Metkai echoed, clenching his fist. Mu Yue's expression softened. All right. I'll trust you. Finish this test paper, and I'll teach you fire release, great dragon fire technique, and the leaf whirlwind. That's amazing. I knew you were the best, Mu Yue-sensei. I won't let you down, Obito gushed. He felt today was incredibly lucky. He'd improved in theory and gained a powerful teacher. Mu Yue-sensei, I'll train your taijutsu with everything I've got. Metkai added solemnly, equally thrilled. Mu Yue looked at the 2 of them and smiled contentedly as 2 small confirmation windows popped up, one for Uchiha Obito and one for Metkai. Yes, he thought, you 2 are making a very big profit. Relationship established successfully. Current trust level 2. Relationship established successfully. Current trust level 2. Mu Yue nodded to himself. Both trust levels were at 2, worth disguising himself as prey to lure them in. Raising trust, he'd learned, wasn't easy. It would require time and steady effort. If the level stayed at 1, the early benefits would be much lower. A new skill notification appeared. You have 2 disciples with potential of S or above. Skill gained. Teaching. Teaching. The knowledge you impart is more easily absorbed. Simple and direct, but powerful. The skill increased the effectiveness of his instruction. Mu Yue tested it and found it was a passive ability he could toggle on and off. For something with no downside, he naturally kept it on, unless Danzo ever noticed his teaching ability and demanded he teach it root, in which case he'd turn it off in a heartbeat. The only disappointment was that the daily disciple return reward didn't scale with the number of disciples. He still only had 1 chance per day. He'd assumed that if making 1 meal for Shisui had yielded 50 chakra, making food for 3 disciples every day would net at least 150 chakra, much faster than grinding classes. He'd been optimistic. But there was logic to the limitation. Human emotions had thresholds. With gradual, repeated stimulation, that threshold rose, making it less likely to trigger big rewards. Having 3 disciples did help, though. They could take turns triggering rewards, increasing the number of large payouts and slowing the growth of each individual's emotional threshold. Besides, the current growth rate is decent, Mu Yue muttered, glancing at his status panel. Name, Hayeri Mugitsu, age 18. Chakra, 4405 skills. Fire, release Great Dragon Fire Technique, water release, water formation wall. Wind release, pressure damage, teaching. Compared to when he'd first transmigrated, Mu Yue had gained 105 chakra in total over 5 days. 90 of those points came from classes and disciple return rewards. The other 15 came from his own training and smaller disciple-to-master returns. Most of his other rewards had been various ninjutsu techniques. If he'd concentrated entirely on chakra, he estimated he could gain at least 100 chakra per week from classes alone, without counting disciple rewards. Still, at this stage he preferred to aim for A-rank rewards, or split his focus between A and B. The system's lecture rewards were especially useful. Ninjutsu were learned instantly and completely, combat-ready. And if the technique belonged to an attribute he hadn't mastered, nature transformation would be included. Duplicate draws would simply add experience. Without that, he'd have to spend a lot of time practicing and figuring out how to cultivate them. For now, more techniques were valuable, but eventually chakra itself, the foundation of a ninja, would need focus. "Teacher, I'm done." Obito burst in, proud and eager. He'd put everything he had into his practice and finished his test paper. "I'm done too," Metkai called, unwilling to be outdone. Mu Yue smiled. It was Konoha. The clone technique was common here. He molded a shadow clone and said, "You explain the principle of the leaf whirlwind to Metkai first," then demonstrated a few times. Since one student was focusing on Taijutsu and the other on ninjutsu, Mu Yue couldn't teach them together. He planned to have his main body teach Obito ninjutsu while the clone worked with Metkai, then switch after half an hour. Mu Yue didn't want to be a teacher to just one person. He wanted to spread what warmth and guidance he could to every disciple. As he had with Shisui, he broke everything down meticulously, guiding them almost hand in hand. A system notification popped up as he finished demonstrating. "You taught your disciple fire release, Great Dragon Fire Technique. Due to your disciple's immense gratitude, the reward was a critical hit, granting you ninjutsu water release, Water Dragon Bullet Technique. Proficient." Yu frowned in thought. He remembered teaching Shisui the Great Dragon Fire Technique earlier, so why hadn't that counted as a disciple return reward then? He figured out a likely hidden rule. Rewards gained from the same disciple couldn't trigger further disciple return rewards. He jotted that away mentally. He skimmed the new technique's details and sighed inwardly. "Please don't be one of those 44-hand seal water dragon bullets," he thought, recalling Kakashi and Zabuza's epic seal-heavy water dragon. So many hand seals looked cool on screen, but in real combat, they were impractical unless someone else created a distraction. The system's proficient version didn't disappoint, only 6 hand seals. With practice and increased proficiency, the sequence could be simplified even further. Mu Yue stuck to the schedule. After teaching Obito for half an hour, he switched to Metkai while the clone finished with Obito. He moved between the 3 students all day, giving pointers and encouragement. At noon, he caught 4 fish in the river and roasted them over a fire for lunch, 1 each. "It's so delicious, Mu Yue-sensei," Obito said around a happy mouthful. "If you opened a barbecue stand, you'd be packed." Shisui and Metkai nodded in agreement. Mu Yue chuckled and warned, "Be careful, don't swallow any bones." He thought his own barbecue was ordinary at best. He rarely barbecued. The food tasted better because everyone was in good spirits, eating outdoors together. Shisui wasn't used to dining in company. Obito usually ate with his grandmother, and Metkai with his father. The novelty and the atmosphere made the simple roast fish feel special. After an hour's rest, they returned to training. "Actually, this ninjutsu isn't that hard," Obito said with pride, watching a round, chubby fire dragon rolling out of his hands. It was much smoother than his previous attempts at the fire release, Great Fireball Technique. Shisui, practicing the Great Dragon Fire Technique nearby, exhaled a ferocious, fanged, imposing fire dragon. Seeing Shisui's beast, Obito instinctively hid his cute little dragon behind it. Metkai, who had kicked plenty of leaf whirlwinds in his time, was about to take a breather when he noticed the scene and walked over. Perhaps remembering the camaraderie from that morning, he offered, "Don't worry, the fire dragon is small and cute now, but it'll be as strong as Mu Yue-sensei's someday." What was meant as comfort somehow felt like a slight to Obito. A burst of grievance flared in him, and he threw himself back into practice with renewed vigor. Not wanting to be left behind, Metkai rested for a moment, and then resumed training as well. Watching them, Mu Yue couldn't help but smile. Those two were remarkably compatible. Their rivalry and encouragement pushed each other forward. They trained until dinner, then Mu Yue walked each of them home and reminded them to keep practicing the next day. Sunday was another full day of training. The disciple return triggered that day gave Mu Yue 50 chakra. A new week began. Chapter 12. Personality is a good thing. In the morning, Kotetsu Hagane finished washing up in a hurry, ate breakfast, and dashed out the door for school. "You're up early today. What's the rush?" his mother asked, puzzled. "Of course, to get to school early and study," Kotetsu lied without turning back. He didn't dislike school, but it wasn't exactly thrilling. Few teachers were as engaging as Mu Yue. The real reason Kotetsu was rushing was far less studious. He couldn't wait to find out whether his good brother Izumo Kamizuki had finally made a move in his romantic plan. Kotetsu had planted the idea on Thursday. Izumo had said on Friday he hadn't dared yet and needed more time. 2 days over the weekend should have been enough preparation, Kotetsu thought. When Kotetsu arrived at the classroom, only a few students were there. Izumo wasn't among them yet. After about 7 or 8 minutes, Izumo came in, looking glum. "Izumo, you look like you didn't sleep well," Kotetsu asked. Izumo shook his head. "Did you give her the flowers over the weekend?" Kotetsu pressed. Izumo's expression fell deeper. "Don't even mention it," he sighed. "She was looking at our family's flower garden, but not because she likes flowers. She has pollen allergies and was worried the pollen would blow around." Kotetsu fell silent for a moment, then asked, "So, you didn't give her the flowers?" Izumo didn't answer, but his silence and forlorn face said it all. Kotetsu patted his shoulder. "It's fine. I know a cute girl who plays with Miho. How about we hang out with her sometime and get to know her?" "That would be great, Brother Tetsu." Izumo brightened instantly. "Actually, I thought of another brilliant plan over the weekend to help you with your cousin." "That sounds awesome. Tell me." "Class begin." Mu Yue's voice cut through the conversation. They had both missed the bell in the middle of their chatter. They hurried to sit up straight and listen. After 2 days without Mu Yue's class, they realized how much they'd missed it. True to form, Mu Yue's lesson was relaxed and entertaining, and before they noticed, a lot of useful knowledge had seeped into their heads. Lecture pleaded, water release, water severing wave. Mu Yue's eyes lit up when he saw the reward. Water severing wave was no simple technique. It was a water release developed by the second Hokage, capable of producing a high-pressure linear jet strong enough to sever the roots of the divine tree. Mu Yue was in a very good mood. Then more good news came. "Teacher Mu Yue, I remember you don't have class this afternoon. Could you cover for me? I have a ninjutsu class for class 2, grade 4. Ikeya Yu asked in the office. "Substituting is no problem, Teacher Ikeya. Are you unwell?" Mu Yue asked, keeping up his concerned persona even though he was pleased to help. "I'm fine. Thanks," Ikeya Yu said, then explained. "It's about the blind date from before. I plan to go shopping with her this afternoon." "Why not pick a time with fewer classes?" Ueda Aya complained. "She said she's only free this afternoon," Ikeya Yu replied. He looked embarrassed at inconveniencing Mu Yu. Ueda Aya muttered that the blind date wouldn't end well. If the girl were genuinely interested, she wouldn't make Ikeya go through so much trouble. Mu Yue only smiled. "It's good to be busy. I can get more rewards," he said lightly. "Thank you so much, Teacher Mu Yue. If it goes well, I'll treat you to the best restaurant in Konoha," Ikeya Yu said gratefully, before rushing off to prepare. When Mu Yue felt it was time, he cleaned his desk and went to class 2, grade 4. He arrived at the door just as the bell rang. "Teacher Ikeya has an engagement, so I'll be substituting for this afternoon's ninjutsu class," he announced as he walked to the front. He scanned the room. Everyone was present except Obito. A few minutes into class, Obito burst in, out of breath and stunned to see Mu Yue at the podium. For a second he thought he had entered the wrong classroom, but seeing his classmates proved, otherwise. He blurted an explanation. "Teacher Mu Yue, I didn't mean to be late. I ran into an old woman and wasted time helping her," someone in the class finished, earning a laugh. "It's true. If I'd known Teacher Mu Yue would be teaching, I would have come half an hour early," Obito protested. He didn't want Mu Yue to think he wasn't serious about studying. "Return to your seat," Mu Yue said, nodding, and added, "You shouldn't be late for Teacher Ikea's class either." At the ninja school, ninjutsu classes started in the first grade, but covered only 3 techniques at the basic level: transformation technique, clone technique, and substitution technique. It might seem like a slow curriculum, but for most students aiming to become chuunin, mastering those basics was already a challenge. Even though they'd taken the 3-body technique class many times, Mu Yue's ninjutsu lessons still caught their interest. "So that's why my clones never looked like me before," one student exclaimed, showing clear improvement. "I hope Teacher Ikea gets more engagements," another joked, "so we can have more of Teacher Mu Yue's classes." Everyone agreed. Mu Yue didn't comment. Secretly, he appreciated how useful the system's skill drops were. Lecting, reward, lightning release, light clone. Immediately, Mu Yue's mind filled with the theory and experience for lightning release chakra transformation and techniques related to lightning release, shadow clone. It wasn't the strongest ninjutsu, but unlocking another chakra nature was valuable, especially since he'd already gotten a drop earlier in the morning. For the next half-month, Mu Yue settled into a routine. If no one needed a substitute, he researched ninjutsu theory in the office. If someone asked him to cover, he accepted without hesitation. At home, he taught Shisui and Obito while training his own chakra. His substitute lessons were so effective that students who'd had him wanted him again, and his good rapport with colleagues made him popular among the teachers as well. Students thought Mu Yue was the perfect teacher, interesting in class, gentle with people, and handsome. The faculty found him sincere and kind. Mu Yue, now the center of attention, didn't think much of it. He had simply crafted the persona he wanted. Now, he was left wondering why a masked ninja was standing in his yard. Chapter 13, Namikaze Minato, one more look and he'll explode. "Knight, you finished your mission well. Danzo-sama asked me to give you these." Heisuhiro passed 2 scrolls to Mu Yue. Mu Yue accepted them with a calm nod and said nothing. Root operatives didn't need small talk. Heisuhiro didn't linger either. After handing over the scrolls, he vanished in a flash to avoid exposing Mu Yue's identity. Once Heisuhiro's chakra faded into the distance, Mu Yue returned to his room and opened the scrolls. One contained a fire release jutsu, fire release, great dragon fire technique. The other was Danzo's report, praise for a completed mission and new instructions. Danzo commended Mu Yue for using his initiative to quickly integrate into the ninja school's decision-making and for doing well. As reward, Danzo granted a powerful fire jutsu. He warned Mu Yue not to become arrogant, to keep progressing at the academy, and to pay careful attention to Uchiha Shisui in his class while also watching other Uchiha students. Finally, Danzo sketched out a big prospect. If Mu Yue sustained this performance, Danzo would help him get promoted to Special Jonin and secure an important post at the academy. After reading it, flames flickered in Mu Yue's hand and the scrolls turned to ash. Special Jonin, important position. Ha! Mu Yue couldn't help but chuckle. The original host might have been fired up by Danzo's combo of reward and promise, but Mu Yue felt nothing. He already knew the fire release, great dragon fire technique. He had no interest in climbing to Special Jonin. It was all rather amusing to him. Mu Yue planned to practice with his main body while a shadow clone read the books, but then he realized he had finished every ninjutsu book he owned. After a moment's thought, he decided to go to Konoha's library. It was old, founded back in the second Hokage's time, and had a wide range of materials, including some ninjutsu files. Forbidden or high-level jutsu weren't there, and borrowing jutsu was costly, but Mu Yue wasn't going for basic jutsu. He wanted anything on sealing techniques and, more specifically, restrictive cursed seals. If he could study the theory, it would be faster than blind practice. He wanted to see whether he could break the tongue-severing seal on his body. Even if that cursed seal was not as awful as the caged bird, having someone else's curse on him still felt wrong. Walking through the crowded streets of Konoha, Mu Yue felt a little lightheaded. It had been more than half a month since he'd transmigrated into this world, and this was the first time his main body had gone out for a stroll. Usually a shadow clone did errands. With his strange background and the dangers of the world, Mu Yue always felt a lack of security. After a half-month of cheating, though, he had learned a few more jutsu and his chakra had increased. For the first time he felt slightly more confident that he wouldn't die to an unknown AoE. At the library, he presented his ninja notebook to the attendant. Name, ninja ID, the usual. The library was for ninja only. The attendant scanned it and nodded him through. Just as Mu Yue stepped inside, he noticed a familiar figure, a man with golden hair and a gentle smile. Minato Namikaze caught Mu Yue's gaze. They nodded to each other briefly. Mu Yue went in while Minato left. A system readout flashed once in Mu Yue's mind. Name, Minato Namikaze. Chakra, 40,000. Potential, S evaluation. Killing Jonin is like slaughtering a chicken. One more look and you'll explode. Mu Yue's face didn't change, but internally he was stunned. He'd never seen chakra numbers in the tens of thousands before. 40,000 was enormous, equivalent to an 86-year-old Shisui, the readout claimed. The evaluation was frighteningly high, suggesting Minato could slaughter Jonin with ease. At this point, Minato hadn't yet earned the Yellow Flash title. To the public, he was just a very capable Jonin, and his teacher Jiraiya of the Sannin was the more famous name. But Mu Yue thought the assessment made sense. Someone, who had mastered Flying Thunder God, would be terrifying against ordinary Jonin. Speed like that makes short work of weaker opponents. If only Minato already had a son at the Ninja Academy, Mu Yue thought. He wanted to get close to Minato. Minato's mastery of sealing techniques wasn't low, and Mu Yue was a little envious. Cursed seals are essentially a branch of sealing techniques. Having a sealing master like Minato as an advisor would make breaking the tongue-severing seal much easier. Kushina, being a Jinchuriki, was too delicate a subject to approach. He checked out 2 books on sealing techniques and 3 other unrelated volumes, completed registration and payment, then left the library. In Konoha's southern mirror forest, Mu Yue was training his students for the upcoming exam. You two remember what you promised, right? You have to pass tomorrow's theory test, Mu Yue reminded Obito and Metkai. Of course, if I don't pass, you can punish me however you want, Mu Yue-sensei, Obito said confidently. They'd recently taken an old exam, and Obito had scored 30 points, several points above the passing line based on his experience. At the ninja school, the pass mark was half of the average score. The average usually ran just over 50, so the pass threshold tended to be in the mid-20s. Obito was sure he was safe. That's right, if I don't pass, I'll run 800 laps around Konoha, Metkai boomed, full of spirit. He'd also scored 30 on the practice. Not only do I want to pass theory, I want first place in practical, Obito added. After more than half a month under Mu Yue's guidance, he felt stronger than his former self. I won't just hand over first place, Metkai replied, not willing to concede. Mu Yue smiled but said nothing. He knew the overall strength of 4th graders well enough to know they might not actually get first. There was a Hyuga student in class 4-1 who was seriously strong. Obito and Metkai's potentials hadn't yet been realized. Obito hadn't awakened his Sharingan, and Metkai hadn't opened the 8 gates, so there were too many variables. Mu Yue glanced at Shisui, quietly reading nearby. He was certain Shisui would top the grade in both theory and practical. If the competition reached across grades, Shisui might even be first in the whole academy. I wonder if the system will give teachers rewards if their students do well in the exam, Mu Yue thought. Chapter 14. The crane will eventually counterattack. This is our first exam. I'm kind of nervous. I wonder if the questions will be hard. I hope not. If I fail, I'll get a beating when I get home. Relax. Didn't Teacher Mu Yue give us a practice test? We should be fine. Because it was their first real exam, a lot of students in Class 1, Grade 1 were tense. They feared tricky questions or low scores that would earn them scolding at home. Anko, Izumo, you two nervous? Kotetsu Hagane asked Izumo Kamizuki. What's there to be nervous about? It's just a small exam. Watch me ace it, Anko said with a grin. Of course you're nervous isn't like usual. These results are going to be posted, Izumo replied. I'm nervous too. On Teacher Habshang's practice test, I only scored 80. The real thing will probably be harder. I'll probably get 60 or 70, Kotetsu admitted. My practice was a bit better, 87, but I think I'll still be down to 60 or 70, Izumo said sourly. You guys scored that high? Anko was stunned. She'd been so confident but had only scraped into the 60s on the practice. Practice scores don't count. They're not real, Izumo sighed. Let's try to do well. If average scores are low, they might change the teacher. Then it wouldn't be Teacher Mu Yue anymore. Change teachers? Fine if it's someone else, but not Teacher Habshang. He can't be replaced, Anko said firmly. Although Mu Yue was their homeroom teacher, he didn't teach every subject. Several other teachers also taught the class. Still, Mu Yue was the one everyone liked. Other teachers' classes are boring. Only Teacher Mu Yue's lessons are interesting and easy to understand, Izumo agreed. Why don't we tell the whole class and motivate everyone? Izumo had read in novels that morale before a big fight was crucial. Anko thought it was a good idea. She climbed onto her desk and announced the news to everyone. Her announcement caused a stir. Mu Yue was their most beloved teacher. Everyone, try to score well. If Teacher Mu Yue leaves and we get another boring teacher like physical prowess, wouldn't that be awful? Kotetsu seized the moment to shout. Study hard. We absolutely won't let Teacher Mu Yue be replaced. I'll be blunt. If anyone fails, I'll look down on them. Mu Yue's taught us so well, someone added. Shisui didn't join in. He didn't need to. He planned to act and take first place in the whole grade. If the class pulled their scores up, the administration wouldn't replace the teacher. Mu Yue smiled at the students' enthusiasm, but he thought they were worrying for nothing. Teacher replacements were decided over a semester or a whole year, and besides, Mu Yue's practice test had actually been tougher than the real one. Just then, Mu Yue's voice cut through the chatter and silenced the class. He stood in the doorway. I believe everyone can do well, he said with a smile, then left to proctor the class he'd been assigned. Many students wanting to study hard to keep him as their teacher made Mu Yue quietly pleased. Mu Yue's proctoring assignment had been drawn at random. He was in charge of Class 2, Grade 4 today. He walked in, climbed to the podium, and called, Quiet down. The exam is about to begin. Teacher Mu Yue. Several students in Class 2, Grade 4 greeted him. Mu Yue smiled and nodded back. He substituted in that class often. Many of them were familiar with him. Compared to Teacher Ikeayu, Mu Yue was even more popular. With Teacher Mu Yue watching, I have to pass this time. Metkai inhaled like he was facing a fearsome opponent. Given a choice between a theoretical exam and an actual chuunin battle, he'd pick the fight every time. He was graduating next year. With a burst of power, he might beat a formal ninja, but theory questions left him helpless. Rin, wait and see. I'll change your opinion of me this time, Obito whispered confidently. You'll pass this time, right? I believe in you. Rin Nohara smiled, encouraging as always. Despite Obito's many past promises that hadn't panned out, she still hoped he could shake his dead-last reputation. Get the ones you know right, check them over, and save the hard ones for last, Rin reminded him gently. Obito nodded. Another proctor, Kimura Sugito, a colleague of Mu Yue's, entered the room. Each exam room had 2 proctors. When the bell rang, Mu Yue and Kimura handed out the papers together. One of the teachers was quiet, the other chatty. They took turns sitting near the podium and exchanging comments now and then. Teacher Ikigaya must be having a rough time. His semester bonus is probably gone. He's been saddled with 2 dead-last students, Kimura sighed. Who knows? Maybe they'll study hard this semester and surprise us, Mu Yue said with a wry smile. He actually thought Obito and Metkai might astonish everyone this time. They haven't passed a theory exam in 3 straight years. If they could pass, they'd have done it already. The higher you go, the tougher the curriculum gets, Kimura said, skeptical. Thank goodness they graduate after this academic year, otherwise, it'd be our problem. After a brief chat, Mu Yue resumed his rounds. He missed teaching. The exams meant the Ninja Academy was suspended for 3 days. Day 1 was theory, Day 2 and Day 3 were practical combat to determine the grade rankings. Those 3 days of suspension meant fewer ninjutsu practices and less refined chakra for everyone. Fortunately, the disciple return system was still available. After the theoretical exam, Mu Yue gave Obito some shuriken, which produced a small return. Obito gained 50 chakra. "Just you wait, Teacher Mu Yue. I'll use these shuriken to beat them all and take first place," Obito exclaimed gratefully. The practical exam was about to begin. 15. The underappreciated Obito Training Ground 16 was crowded that morning. Because the whole ninja school was taking the practical exam at once and combat required space, the playground wouldn't do, so they used the larger training ground. Mu Yue took attendance, and after confirming everyone was present, he and Kimura Sugito announced the start of the lot drawing. The rules were simple. Students would be called up by class roster to draw lots, and the lot number would determine opponents. Number 1 fought number 2, number 3 fought number 4, and so on. "I'm number 1, Rin. What's your number?" Obito asked eagerly after drawing his lot. "I'm number 10, so you're in the first match, Obito," Rin Nohara answered. "It doesn't matter what match it is. I'll win," Obito declared with absolute confidence. After a month of training with Mu Yue, he felt transformed. His old self was behind him. He expected everyone to be surprised by his strength now. Obito then checked Metgai's number. 40, Guy replied. "So we'll probably only meet at the very end," Obito said, surprised that Guy was at the opposite end. "Don't lose before me, Obito." Metkai gave him a thumbs up. "That's what I should be saying. I'm a Uchiha." Obito responded, half teasing. Whether Metkai meant to provoke him or not, Obito took it as a challenge. "Where do you two get this confidence?" A classmate muttered. The fact that 2 students known for finishing last were talking showdowns irritated him. "The first battle is about to begin. Examinee number 1, Uchiha Obito, and examinee number 2, Uchiha Tekka, prepare," Mu Yue announced, glancing at his watch. Obito didn't argue with the doubters. He walked straight to the square marked by white lines. Uchiha Tekka moved into the ring as well. They were the same age, from the same clan, and classmates, but the two hardly ever spoke. There was no dramatic history between them. Simply, Tekka thought Obito foolish and weak, and Obito found Tekka cold and distant. "Both are Uchiha. This should be interesting," some onlookers muttered, enjoying the potential drama. Losing against a clanmate carried extra shame. "You think there's any suspense? Tekka's going to win," a nearby student scoffed. "Tekka's been first in 2nd and 3rd grade. Only Kakashi beat him in 1st grade. And Obito? He's never passed a theory exam and his practical combat is only average. There's no way Obito beats him." Rin watched worriedly. She knew Obito's luck could be terrible, and while his training with Mu Yue had improved him, facing a consistent top performer like Tekka was daunting. Deep down, she wanted Obito to win, but realistically, Tekka had a clear edge. "Almost everyone's pessimistic," Metkai said cheerfully, arms folded. But a victory in those circumstances would be even more exhilarating. He believed in Obito. Word spread, and some nearby 4th grade classes drifted over. Practical exams were open to anyone who stayed within the training ground, but when they saw who was fighting, many lost interest. This looked like a mismatch. Only a few stayed to see Tekka in action. The 2 opponents faced each other and formed the confrontation seal, an official signal that one was about to attack. Afterwards, they would form the reconciliation seal to show they remained comrades. "Begin," Mu Yue called. Tekka acted immediately. He pulled 3 shuriken from his pouch and threw them at Obito's head, chest, and feet, then charged. Obito casually drew 3 shuriken as well and threw them. The 6 blades met in midair with a sharp metallic clash and fell to the ground. Uchiha shuriken throwing is exceptional. Even Uchiha Obito, who's considered only average, shows skill, Kimura Sugito observed. Intercepting shuriken with shuriken took remarkable precision. Because the ring was small, Tekka closed the distance and launched a right hook. Obito met it with his own fist and then clinched. They grappled, sending up clouds of dust as they traded blows and holds. "Wait, Obito's actually good at taijutsu?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Many had expected Tekka to toss Obito aside instantly. Seeing Obito holding his ground surprised students from other classes and their own alike. Rin's mouth was slightly open in disbelief. She had thought Obito was all bluster. She hadn't expected this real improvement. Obito has improved a lot, several observers admitted. Kimura Sugito, however, shook his head. He still has weaknesses. His taijutsu needs work. Mu Yue nodded in agreement. A month was not enough to fix everything. Obito had focused mostly on fire release techniques and nature transformation under Mu Yue's guidance, and those areas had seen the greatest gains. Under pressure, Obito was gradually pushed back. The skeptic who had earlier dismissed him sighed with relief. Tekka seemed in control. Still, even that critic admitted the old nickname, Dead Last of the Uchiha, might be too harsh now. Finding a moment when Tekka's punch left an opening, Obito created some distance and began to form hand signs. He hadn't practiced fire release for a month to keep trading punches. Fire release, Great Dragon Fire technique. Obito's hands flashed through the seals. He drew chakra into his mouth, completed nature and shape transformation with lightning speed, and unleashed a fierce burning dragon of fire toward Uchiha Tekka. Tekka had already been growing more surprised as the close combat exchanged hands earlier. He hadn't expected Obito to have improved so much over a single break, more than he had in the whole of his third year. When Obito began forming seals for a ninjutsu, Tekka quickly started shaping seals of his own, preparing to answer with his own technique. He refused to accept losing a ninjutsu clash to Obito just because Obito's taijutsu had gotten better. Fire release, Great Fireball technique. Tekka expelled chakra and spat a man-sized ball of flame at Obito. On one side, a fanged fire dragon lunged. On the other, a blazing great fireball rolled forward. The two jutsu were poised to collide. "I'm so jealous. They've already learned offensive ninjutsu," several students whispered. Many of them were still struggling with the three-body technique and had no way to learn new jutsu yet. "Dead last? Hardly," some from other classes muttered. They had come expecting to see Uchiha Tekka's prowess, only to discover that Obito could wield a formidable fire release. This was no dead last performance, more like an honor student's. "But Tekka's fireball looks bigger than Obito's dragon," another observed. In a straight ninjutsu clash, a larger great fireball might seem to win. Kimura Sugito watched, evaluating. "As expected of the Uchiha," he said quietly. He didn't expect Obito to be so deep. Even if Obito wasn't on par with Tekka yet, with that strength he could still rank near the top of his class. It was a shame his theoretical scores were so low. Just as the two attacks neared each other, Obito's fire dragon suddenly kicked upward, avoiding a direct collision with the great fireball, and turned to bite at Tekka. Obito slipped out of the fireball's path while still controlling his dragon. Tekka hadn't expected such a dishonorable move, breaking off the straightforward clash, and for a moment he was caught off guard. A great fireball couldn't turn at once. Seeing Obito's dragon steaming in, Tekka tried to dodge, but it was too late. He braced himself for the blow. Then Mu Yue, who had been ready, moved. He flickered into place beside Tekka and scooped him out of the combat area before setting him down. "Thank you, Sensei," Tekka said. If Mu Yue hadn't intervened, he would have been hit. Mu Yue nodded and announced the result. First match, Uchiha Obito wins. The spectators were stunned. The situation had changed in an instant. They'd been expecting a blazing clash, not Obito slipping in a decisive, sneaky finish. Some students muttered, "This Uchiha Obito is not to be underestimated." Tekka's fireball had looked impressive, but it wasn't very flexible. Obito's great dragon fire had a smaller range, but it was highly maneuverable and much easier to land. "Obito, well done!" Rin Nohara cheered, genuinely happy. A win against Uchiha Tekka on the practical exam meant nobody could call Obito a dead last anymore. At the end of the day, a ninja's strength spoke loudest. Obito strolled over, grinning smugly at Rin's praise. "Heh, I told you it'd be fine." In that moment, he felt deeply grateful to Mu Yue. He knew his progress came from being Mu Yue's disciple and receiving steady guidance. If he were still his old self, he might have been rattled by Tekka's earlier blows and lost his composure. Disciple Uchiha Obito's trust level has increased. Current trust level, 3. A system message blinked across Mu Yue's view as he read the exam roster. He glanced at Obito, smiling, chatting with Rin, and couldn't help but think, being love-struck has its perks. Trust levels were hard to raise. Each level brought huge gains, effectively multiplying benefits and enhancing the return from a disciple's growth. Don't underestimate the chakra returns. What seemed small before was because the others had not hit their rapid growth phase yet. If someone like Shisui reached that phase, and his chakra rose by 10,000, a higher trust level could grant an extra 10,000 chakra. Mu Yue had hoped to reach 1 trust level 3 within a semester. Obito hitting level 3 in a month was an unexpected bonus. The remaining matches were less dramatic, and most finished without need for intervention. Mu Yue sat at the proctor's table, marking performances, and chatting quietly with Kimura Sugito. If not for the duty to supervise, he'd have wandered the grounds using appraisal to check for overlooked geniuses. He still had one of 4 disciple slots empty, and wasn't willing to fill it with anyone below S-rank talent. If the cap could be increased, the future rewards would grow. There were plenty of geniuses in Konoha and across the ninja world. There was no rush to pick the wrong person. Mu Yue opened his panel to check his own status. Haya Mugetsu, age teen. Chakra, skills, water release, water severing wave, fire release, great dragon fire technique, water release, water formation wall, wind release, pressure damage. Evaluation. You have mastered many ninjutsu, including various advanced techniques, allowing you to handle all sorts of situations. Ordinary jonin are no match for you. His improvement had been rapid. His chakra had risen by 1,000 in a month, and his ninjutsu list had grown from 2 to dozens, including powerful techniques like water-severing wave. Glancing at the panel, he could beat his earlier self from when he first transmigrated. A morning passed, and the first 2 rounds wrapped up. Metkai, though he resolved his matches cleanly and decisively, didn't manage a spectacle like Obito. His opponents were largely ordinary, and it wasn't enough to change everyone's impressions outright. Mu Yue, however, knew it was only a matter of time. The class's internal practical exam would finish in the afternoon, and that was when a class champion would be decided. 17. Metkai clears his name. At noon in the teacher's office, they compared notes about what they'd seen and heard while proctoring the exams. Hyuga Homura from Class 1, Grade 4 is incredible, Ikeya said with envy. As you'd expect from the Hyuga clan, almost no one in Class 1 lasted a minute against him. He's bound to be the yearly grade-level practical exam champion again. Ikeya wished he were the homeroom teacher for Class 1, Grade 4 instead of Class 2, Grade 4. Then the bonus would be easy, and he'd have enough money to take his blind date to a nice restaurant. But with classes performing that well, switching teachers was out of the question. Not so fast, Kimura Sugito interrupted. I think Uchiha Obito from your class is pretty strong too. He might contend for the top spot. Ikeya blinked. Sugito, you mean Uchiha Tekka, right? Tekka is strong. I'm not mixing names up. I mean Uchiha Obito, Kimura said firmly. He was young, not senile. He was sure of what he'd seen. Uchiha Obito? No way. Why would he be strong? Ikeya looked at him skeptically. Everyone knew Obito as the Uchiha who always came in last. How could he suddenly be formidable? Am I lying? Obito's first opponent was the Uchiha Tekka you mentioned, and he won decisively, Kimura insisted. When Ikeya still looked unconvinced, Kimura pulled Mu Yue into the conversation. Teacher Mu Yue and I proctored together. Ask him if you don't believe me. Ikeya turned to Mu Yue. Mu Yue nodded. As Teacher Kimura said, Uchiha Obito defeated Uchiha Tekka in the first round. Ikeya scratched his head. Well, that's really odd. He trusted Mu Yue. After only a month, the man had already won the trust of the faculty, so he had to accept it, but he couldn't wrap his head around it. How could the one everyone called dead last beat a former class champion? Had some mysterious teacher secretly been giving Obito private lessons in advanced ninjutsu? Seeing Ikeya so puzzled, Mu Yue thought wryly, you're amazed just because Obito showed his strength. If Metkai displayed his, you'd swear you were under a genjutsu. Ikeya had likely secured his bonus this year by luck, Mu Yue figured. Still, luck wasn't everything. Ikeya had helped him occasionally by arranging substitute teaching, recruiting disciples, and treating him to meals. He'd earned some merit for that, too. Teacher Habsheng's class is really impressive, Ueda Aya, who'd been quiet, added. She had proctored Mu Yue's Class 1, Grade 1. Their 3-body technique overall feels almost on par with the second graders I teach, especially that genius Uchiha Shisui. He reminds me of Kakashi Hatake a few years back. This year's first grade practical exam champion will definitely be him. Compared to Kakashi? Isn't that a bit much? Ikeya asked. Being likened to Kakashi was high praise. Kakashi had been a recognized prodigy, promoted to chuunin just a year after graduation. It's not an exaggeration. He's simply in a different league from the other first graders, Ueda insisted. That's great for Teacher Habshang. You're so lucky. The excellent performance review will be yours. Ikeya said, green with envy. Luck? No. Teacher Habshang teaches well, Ueda corrected. I don't think Class 1, Grade 1 is full of geniuses by chance. The students we subbed for kept asking for Mu Yue to teach more. It wasn't just 1 or 2 classes. Every class he substituted for praised him. Slip of the tongue. Of course I know Teacher Habshang is good, Ikeya protested, a little dejected. He taught most of the time himself, but the students preferred Mu Yue whenever he filled in. My students wish I were busy every day so Teacher Habshang could teach their class. It's their own diligence, Mu Yue said modestly. After a while of chatting, Mu Yue returned to practicing calligraphy until the afternoon session began. The venue was still Training Ground 16, but far fewer students were present. The exam didn't force eliminated students to stay, so they could choose whether to come back. Battles resumed one after another. Rin no. Ara, never particularly skilled in combat, was knocked out in the first round of the afternoon. And then Might Guy started catching everyone's attention. Guy's taijutsu is that strong? His speed is insane. He beat Daisuke with 1 kick. The watching students murmured in astonishment. He changed so much. In 3rd grade he was only okay, one student, who knew Guy, said, baffled. Maybe he trained like mad over the break and this semester. The final match roster was announced. Final battle. Number 1 Uchiha Obito versus number 40 Might Guy. Examinees prepare. Might Guy and Obito exchanged a hard look as they stepped into the ring. Might Guy, I won't give you first place, Obito said, glancing toward Rin, who stood by the sidelines. In front of Rin, he refused to lose. Same here. If I want to be the strongest, I have to take every first place I can. Might Guy replied, brimming with spirit. Those who had mocked the two before felt stung. In 3rd grade, both had been at the bottom. Who would have expected them to be contenders in 4th grade? Before the exam, everyone had assumed Uchiha Tekka would take the title. Nobody imagined how much these two had pushed themselves over the break and into the new term. After a few fierce words, they fell silent. Facing each other, they formed the confrontation seal. Begin! Chapter 18, Mastery of Water Release Chakra. Nature Transformation. The moment Mu Yue announced the start of the exam, Obito immediately fell back, forming hand signs and unleashing ninjutsu as he retreated. He knew Might Guy's strength in taijutsu, so he wasn't going to meet him head-on in close combat. Clone technique! Poof! Poof! 2 perfect copies of Obito sprang up beside him. The 3 Obitos weaved and switched positions, trying to confuse Might Guy. Leaf Whirlwind. Might Guy moved faster than Obito had expected. In an instant, he closed the distance. A blinding whirlwind kick scattered 2 clones, and Obito's real body was sent flying more than a meter. He landed hard, his arm trembling from the impact. He had used his arm to absorb much of the blow, and now it throbbed with pain. Might Guy pressed the advantage, staying on top of Obito and forcing him into continuous close-quarters fighting. In pure taijutsu, Obito had no match for Might Guy, and quickly found himself at a disadvantage. Who do you think will win? The students began to argue among themselves. Might Guy. Obito's going to lose soon, one student said, watching the fight. Not so fast, another countered. When Obito fought Uchiha Tekka, he was also behind in taijutsu, but he won with fire release. Some believed Obito's powerful fire release just hadn't been brought out yet. After all, he had beaten Tekka. That was no small accomplishment. Teacher Mu Yue, who do you think will win? Kimura Sugito asked suddenly. Mu Yue considered for a moment. Might Guy, he answered. Kimura nodded. Although Obito has strong fire release, this arena isn't the right place for him to use it. Mu Yue agreed. The two were actually fairly well matched overall, but on this flat, open ground, Obito, like a turret mage who needed space and time to cast jutsu, was at a disadvantage against a high-speed taijutsu fighter. He had no way to reliably unleash his fire techniques without being given the opening. Sure enough, in the next instant Might Guy found another opening. A leaf whirlwind sent Obito flying again. Might Guy wins, Mu Yue declared, and the exam ended. One student who had bet on Obito groaned and pressed his palm to his forehead. Obito had a knack for surprising in one direction and disappointing in another, beating Tekka when he was expected to lose, then losing to Metkai when everyone thought he might win. "Metkai, you're amazing. How do you train?" someone called, eager for tips. "How do I train?" Metkai smiled and outlined his routine without hesitation. "I get up at 5:30 a.m., run around Konoha before class, practice taijutsu on a training dummy all night, and on weekends. Goodbye." The student who'd asked about training listened until the 5:30 a.m. part, and then politely excused himself. Once Metkai mentioned practicing all night, admiration gave way to disbelief. Even official ninja probably didn't train like that every day. "Obito, are you okay?" Rin came over, concerned. Obito brushed off the dirt and replied lightly, "I'm fine. I barely lost this time. I'll win next time." He put on a brave face for Rin, but she wasn't fooled. She grabbed his arm, rolled up his sleeve, and saw bruises. Rin glared at him. "Playing tough doesn't heal you. Go to the infirmary and get it checked." Obito protested but didn't resist. His mouth was stubborn, but his body was honest. He let Rin pull him toward the infirmary. With the second day's combat exam finished, Metkai prepared to thank Mu Yue and go home to tell his father, Maito Dai. He already imagined his father crying with joy and yelling about youth. Mu Yue, however, stopped him and led him to a quiet spot. "Metkai, congratulations on taking first place," Mu Yue said with a smile. He produced a small booklet and handed it to the student. "This is a taijutsu training manual I put together recently. It also contains some ideas for developing the Leaf Whirlwind. Consider it a gift for your first place finish." Metkai took the manual and glanced at Mu Yue's hand. On the surface, the hand looked clean, but a sharp eye could pick up faint gray smudges on his palm, ink stains that hadn't quite washed out. Opening the booklet and skimming the contents, Metkai realized this was no throwaway pamphlet. It was carefully thought out, tailored ideas, something Mu Yue had clearly labored over and written with intention. Touched, Metkai's emotions burst forth. "Teacher Mu Yue, I won't let your effort go to waste. I'll become the strongest taijutsu shinobi." He was moved to tears. Mu Yue took a tissue and wiped them away, patting Metkai's shoulder. "Seeing a student grow stronger is a teacher's greatest reward," he said sincerely. Metkai nodded solemnly, his resolve strengthened. As Metkai walked away, Mu Yue checked the system message that had appeared in his mind and smiled. "You gifted your disciple a taijutsu training manual. Due to your disciple's immense gratitude, the reward received a huge critical hit, granting water release chakra nature transformation mastery. Disciple Metkai's trust level has increased. Current trust level 3. Mu Yue felt a pleasant rush as the new memory settled. Normally, disciple rewards tended to align with their strengths, Shisui and Obito yielding more fire release, Metkai producing taijutsu-related gains, but sometimes the system granted unrelated boons. Compared to another incremental taijutsu skill, a mastery of water release chakra nature transformation was far more valuable. If he accumulated enough of these, Mu Yue mused, he might even unlock a bloodline limit someday. The increase in trust was an added bonus. He made a mental note for the future. For high-quality gifts, plan them to maximize the disciple's emotional response. The more grateful the disciple, the better the chance of receiving a rare reward. Giving the booklet right after Metkai's victory, letting him see the ink on his hand, and offering a few encouraging words all combined to amplify Metkai's gratitude. After tomorrow's exam, the results should be out in a couple of days, Mu Yue thought, wondering if the system would issue rewards for the exam performances as well. Logically, if the students did well, their teacher should be rewarded too. The third day of the exam ran much faster. Only 2 students from each class were entered, and the ninja school had just 8 classes per grade. Like the day before, attendance for non-examinees was optional, but a lot of students still showed up. Everyone wanted to see who would be the top of 4th grade. "Am I seeing things? Isn't that Uchiha Obito? Why is he one of the examinees?" someone murmured. "You didn't hear about Class 2 yesterday?" his friend answered. "I got knocked out in the first round, ran into our strongest guy by bad luck." "Then that explains it. Obito's gotten really strong. He even beat Uchiha Tekka in our class." The crowd gossiped and debated the contestants with keen interest, sometimes arguing over who was stronger. Even students who had grumbled about Obito or Metkai were suddenly eager to defend their class representatives. Watching the first rounds, Mu Yue thought the grade's top spot would probably go to Shisui. He suspected Obito and Metkai were in trouble. Hyuga Homura's gentle fist was polished, and with the Byakugan advantage, Metkai would have a very hard time, let alone Obito. Mu Yue noted that Hyuga clan techniques still held a distinct edge at this stage. The Byakugan was easier to awaken than the Sharingan, and Gentle Fist made for powerful taijutsu. His students hadn't trained long enough yet. Their skills still had clear weaknesses. As the afternoon moved on, the finals boiled down to 2 matches, Obito versus Hyuga Homura, and Metkai versus a 4th-grade ninja from Class 3. Mu Yue wasn't surprised. Facing Hyuga Homura, Obito was so overwhelmed by Gentle Fist that he never got a chance to use a single ninjutsu. Metkai did better than Obito in the last match, but Homura's Byakugan read his moves perfectly. He, too, couldn't avoid defeat. Obito left the arena a little downcast. He'd hoped to fight for first place, but hadn't even made the top 2. Mu Yue happened to walk by and offered consolation. "Don't get stuck on failures," he said. "Think about how much you've improved since last time and work for the next chance." At that, Obito brightened. He remembered placing 20th in the 3rd-grade final exam. Coming this close to the grade's top 2 was a huge leap. First place now suddenly felt within reach. Mu Yue moved on to Metkai. To his surprise, Guy also looked subdued. Mu Yue had assumed a man of Guy's will wouldn't be overly affected by a single loss, but then he remembered, yesterday he'd given Guy a taijutsu training manual. Guy might feel burdened by expectations. "Failure is part of life," Mu Yue said. "Don't let one loss defeat you." Metkai trembled at the words. He'd already known plenty of failure. Barely becoming a ninja at the entrance exam, getting bested by Kakashi in one move, coming in last in every course, and being labeled the dead last. At 8 years old, he'd carried more setbacks than many adults. Still, he'd begun to understand what his father, Maito Dai, meant by youth never fades. "I understand, Mu Yue-sensei," Metkai replied, his eyes hardening with resolve. He wouldn't brood. He'd train and fight his way to the top. Mu Yue nodded with approval, then headed through the crowd toward Shisui. Shisui was surrounded by students peppering him with questions. When they noticed Mu Yue, everyone greeted him at once. "Habsheng-sensei, I got 2nd in the grade. Is there any reward?" Anko bounced up cheerfully. Mu Yue smiled and ruffled her hair. "How about I treat you to dango?" "Yay! Habsheng-sensei is the best," Anko declared, instantly his #1 fan. Nearby, Kotetsu Hagane couldn't hide a little jealousy. "Shisui, who got 1st in the grade, hasn't even asked for a reward yet. Anko, you're too impatient," he grumbled, though it was more envy than judgment. After sending the students off with good humor, Mu Yue walked with Shisui toward the shopping street. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Pretty ordinary," Shisui said after a moment. "No one really made me fight with everything I had." "That's to be expected," Mu Yue, he replied. "With your level, there aren't many in 4th grade who can match you, and even fewer in 1st grade. Shisui hesitated, then asked, "Mu Yue-sensei, do you think I should graduate early?" Mu Yue's eyes, a striking sky blue, met Shisui's. "Graduate early?" "I heard some talented seniors in the past felt the academy had nothing more to teach them and left quickly," Shisui explained. Mu Yue shook his head. "I don't recommend graduating after 1st grade. At least wait until 2nd or 3rd grade. You may outclass your classmates, but your opponents outside school won't be your peers, especially now with the threat of war always on the horizon. If you feel the curriculum is wasting your time, you can have a shadow clone attend classes while your real self trains under my guidance," he added. "There's little point in leaving if you can't even walk safely on Konoha's main street without being sure of your strength." Shisui's eyes brightened at the suggestion, and he nodded. Mu Yue's advice sat well with him. They bought a pile of dango and returned to school. Before afternoon classes, every student in Class 1, 1st grade, received a portion. Since he'd promised Anko extra, Mu Yue gave her an extra serving. "Habsheng-sensei is the best in the world," Anko crowed. The kids thanked him, their regard for him noticeably higher. The ninja school was efficient. 2 days after the exam, All the results were compiled and announced, just as Mu Yue had expected. 20. The smile never disappears, it just moves. Good morning, Izumo. Early that morning, on his way to the ninja school, Kotetsu Hagane bumped into Izumo Kamizuki and greeted him. Morning, Izumo replied. Kotetsu looped his arm around Izumo's neck in a friendly lock, then let him go and grinned. Why the long face? Izumo sighed. Kotetsu, did you forget? The results are out today. Oh, did the exam go badly for you? Kotetsu remembered Mu Yue mentioning that the results would be posted today. Yeah, I think my score's probably awful. Izumo stared up at the sky at an angle, looking more than a little gloomy. That's okay. I didn't do well either. I'll probably tank mine too. Kotetsu patted Izumo on the shoulder to comfort him. The two of them walked toward the school together. As they approached, they ran into Anko. Izumo, Kotetsu, good morning, she called cheerfully. Morning, Anko, they replied. Anko frowned at their expressions. Why do you two look like you had a nightmare? No, Kotetsu said with a sigh. It's the results day. Neither of us feels confident. We think our scores will be low. Heh, that's not my case. I think I did really well on the exam. Maybe I'll get a high score. Anko smiled with obvious pride. Then I can ask Sensei Habsheng for a reward again. Though she hadn't seen the score yet, Anko felt sure she'd earned it. Kotetsu and Izumo were usually solid in theory, and she'd outperformed them both. Surely that meant a top mark. I envy you, Anko. You were second in practicals, and you did well on theory too, Izumo said, sounding genuinely impressed. Flushed with praise, Anko strutted a little, enjoying herself. As they reached the school, they joined up with Shisui and the others from their class. How'd you do, Shisui? Anko asked. Just so-so, Shisui answered calmly. Anko's anticipation climbed. If Shisui was only average, maybe she could be first. Maybe not first, but top 5, she mused. Normally her results were only average, so she hadn't let herself get carried away yet. At the bulletin board, a crowd had already gathered, buzzing about scores. Class 1's results are insane, so many 70s and 80s. There's even a perfect score, top in practicals too, terrifying. As expected from the class Sensei Mu Yue teaches, Anko ignored the chatter and pushed forward with Kotetsu and Izumo until she reached the Class 2 list. 80 points! Yes! She cheered as she found her name and the 80 beside it. Then she blinked. Something felt off. Kotetsu, Izumo, did you find yours? I did. 92, Kotetsu said. How much? Anko couldn't believe it. 92, he repeated. Anko slapped Kotetsu's shoulder in disbelief. You said you didn't do well, and you got 92? Luck, Kotetsu laughed, trying to play it off. I thought I flubbed it, but it worked out. And you, Izumo, what's your score? Kotetsu asked. 97, Izumo said with a smile. Kotetsu stared as if he'd misheard, but Izumo repeated it. 97, almost perfect. Kotetsu's smile faded while Izumo's only grew wider. You mean I was fussing over you this morning and you scored that high? Kotetsu said, then looped his arm around Izumo and dragged him away, grinning. Anko, incensed at being conned, joined in, shoving and sneaking the occasional punch at Kotetsu. They'd tricked her and still had the scores to prove it. Later, system messages rolled in across the school's notice board. After a month of diligent study, disciple Uchiha Shisui achieved a perfect score in the academic assessment. Rewards, chakra plus 300, skill proficiency scroll. Skill proficiency scroll elevates any mastered ninjutsu to proficient level. After a month of diligent study, disciple Uchiha Obito achieved a good score in the academic assessment. Reward, chakra plus 150. After a month of diligent study, disciple Metkai achieved a good score in the academic assessment. Reward, chakra 50. Mu Yue, as expected, saw the rewards posted. They were far richer than the usual lecture bow, nooses. Even if he lectured endlessly, he couldn't make 600 chakra appear. A single B-rank evaluation only gave 20 chakra. He realized Obito and Might-Guy's theoretical scores had dragged them down. If their practical rankings had been higher, their rewards would have been larger. For a moment, Mu Yue toyed with the idea of asking the school to hold more exams. Normally, there were only 2 exams each semester. If there were 10, he could rack up rewards. The thought flashed and vanished. 10 exams would exhaust both students and teachers, and the administration would never approve it. Besides, he suspected the system only triggered certain kinds of exams for rewards. Mu Yue opened the skill proficiency scroll and applied it to water-severing wave. Immediately, memories of training and of honing that technique flooded him. Though he'd mastered many ninjutsu by now, he still regarded water-severing wave as one of the most powerful. At midday, Mu Yue became the center of conversation in the teacher's office. "Sensei Habsheng, how do you teach? Your students' theory scores are absurd, dozens of points higher on average than the other classes," Kimura Sugito asked. "Yeah, Sensei Mu Yue, any tricks? 2 of mine barely passed this time, but next time." Ikeyu mused. Metkai and Obito's turnaround had rattled them. Both had taken the top 2 spots in their classes' practicals and passed theory. Before Mu Yue could answer, a teacher stepped in and said, "Sensei Habsheng, the principal wants to see you."